The night she stopped running, a woman hunted for 12 years. Walks into a killer's arms to survive. 12 years she hid. 12 years she swallowed her real name, shaved pieces off herself until nothing fit a photograph. Then a man with blood on his cufflinks leaned close at a Manhattan gala and whispered 6 words that ended her invisibility. They're here. You have 90 seconds. What happens next rewrites everything she thought she knew about the massacre that killed her family, and the little girl who walked out of it alive. Stay with me until the very end, hit that like button, and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. The Aurelian Hotel did not have guests. It had clientele, and the distinction mattered to everyone who worked there, because clientele carried the kind of wallets that could end a career over a wrinkled napkin. Lena Voss understood this the way a diver understands pressure, bone deep, without thinking. She moved through the crystal ballroom at 8 minutes past 10, her tray balanced on the flat of 4 fingers, her spine straight enough to hang a picture on, her face arranged into the polite nothing the Aurelian preferred from its waitstaff. 240 people filled the room under chandeliers that cost more than the house she grew up in. A string quartet sawed away at Debussy in the corner. Somewhere behind her, a senator was laughing too hard at a joke a hedge fund man had told, and the hedge fund man was already scanning the room for someone more important to laugh with. "Champagne, ma'am?" The woman didn't answer, didn't look, just lifted a flute off Lena's tray with 2 fingers, the way you'd pluck a grape, and turned her shoulder. Lena kept moving. She was 31 years old that night, though her driver's license said Lena Marsh and put her at 29, and neither number felt like it belonged to her. Her hair was a flat, mousy brown. She touched up herself in a rented bathroom every 6 weeks. Her eyes were hazel and too watchful. She wore no jewelry, no perfume, no nail polish. She had trained herself over 12 years into the shape of a woman nobody would remember after she refilled their water glass. It worked. It had been working. Until tonight. The gala was for the Marchand Foundation. Something about oceans or orphans. Lena had stopped reading the event cards years ago. What mattered was the guest list. Old money. New money. A city councilman whose name she'd seen in a subpoena once. 3 men from the Italian consulate. The Marchand heir himself, tall and boyish, flirting with a Russian model who was 6 inches taller than he was. And against the back wall, near the ice sculpture of a leaping marlin that was already starting to sweat, a man Lena had felt before she saw. She didn't know why. That was the worst part. She glanced, not meaning to, and found him already looking at her. He was tall, but it wasn't the height. The room was full of tall men. It was the stillness. Everyone else at the Aurelian moved like they were being filmed. He moved like he'd already seen the film and was bored of it. Black suit. No tie. A shirt open at the collar in the way that meant rules didn't apply to him. Dark hair going silver at the temples. 40, maybe. 42. His hands were folded at his waist in a way that looked casual and wasn't. Lena had spent 3 years waiting tables in a Brooklyn diner frequented by off-duty cops, and she knew what a man who was armed looked like when he pretended he wasn't. He was armed, and he was watching her. She dropped her eyes and kept walking. Don't, she thought. Don't look again. She reached the service alcove behind a column wrapped in white orchids, slid her empty tray onto the stacking cart, and exhaled for the first time in what felt like a minute. Her hands were shaking, not a lot, just the fingertips. She pressed them flat against the steel of the cart to stop it. "You okay?" Marcus was behind her, loading fresh flutes onto his own tray. Marcus was 22, built like a swimmer, trying to pay off a degree in musical theater. He smiled at her the way he always did, like he was still hoping she'd say yes to coffee. "Fine." "You look like you saw a ghost." "I'm fine, Marcus." Okay. He lifted the tray onto his palm. "Table 9 says the canapés are cold, which, they're canapés. They're supposed to be cold. But I'm not going to be the one to explain that to the ambassador's wife, so." He smiled again and was gone before she could answer, and Lena closed her eyes for exactly 1 second and opened them and got back to work, because standing still at the Aurelian for longer than 1 second was how you got noticed, and being noticed was how you died. She knew that last part for a fact. The attack, when it came, did not announce itself. Later, much later, in a white-tiled bathroom in a penthouse she would not yet have words for. She would try to reconstruct the sequence, and she would realize the first sign had come at 10:19 p.m., when the string quartet finished a piece and did not begin another. 2 full seconds of silence inside the most expensive room in Manhattan. A violinist looking past her music stand at something the audience couldn't see. But Lena didn't catch it, because at 10:19 p.m., she was refilling a water carafe, and a thin woman in lilac silk was complaining, without ever speaking directly to her, that the ice was melting too fast. "Excuse me." The voice came from just behind her shoulder, low, male, too close. Lena turned. It was him. Up close he was worse. Not bad looking. That would have been easier. He had one of those faces that did not give anything away. A mouth made for saying no, eyes the color of wet slate. There was a faint scar hooking through his left eyebrow, pale and old. He smelled like cedar and something darker underneath, something chemical, and Lena's nose told her before her brain did. Gun oil. "Sir," she said, automatic, professional, "may I get you 90 seconds?" She froze. "What?" He did not raise his voice. If anything, he lowered it. He stepped a half-inch closer, as if to admire the orchid centerpiece behind her, and spoke into the space between them like he was commenting on the weather. "You have 90 seconds, Lena. Maybe 80. 2 men came in through the kitchen at 10:12. A third is in the west coat check. They are here for you. Do not scream. Do not run yet. Do you understand me?" The carafe was still in her hand, cold, sweating, heavier than a carafe had any right to be. She was aware of her heartbeat the way you become aware of a tooth that started to ache, suddenly, completely, not going away. Lena. Nobody had called her that in 12 years, not out loud, not even her own reflection most days. "Who?" "Not here." His eyes did not leave hers. His hand came up and rested, lightly, against the small of her back, and it was the calmest, most commanding touch she had ever felt in her life. Not a grab, not a warning, just a hand placed exactly where it needed to be, the way you'd guide a dance partner. "Walk with me. Smile. Now." She didn't smile. She couldn't have smiled if someone had paid her. But she walked. Her body walked. Her body, 12 years trained in the art of not making waves, was obeying him before her mind had caught up. The carafe went onto a passing tray. She didn't even look at whose. Her hand found his arm, the inside of his elbow, and rested there in the pose of a woman being escorted somewhere charming, and she hated herself for how easy it was. "Breathe," he said, and she realized she hadn't been. They crossed the ballroom at the pace of a conversation. He was smiling very faintly at no one in particular. A silver-haired woman lifted her glass to him as they passed, and he dipped his chin at her without breaking stride. Lena caught pieces of him in her peripheral vision, the crisp line of his jaw, the notch in the knot of an absent tie, the small gold pin of a lion on his lapel that she thought, for one day's second, she had seen before. "Where are we?" "Kitchen is compromised. Main entrance is compromised. There's a service stairwell behind the east bar. We go through it. We do not stop. If I tell you to get down, you get down. If I tell you to run, you run, and you don't look back for me. Do you understand?" I don't know you." "No," he said, almost gently. "You don't. That's going to be a problem later. Right now it's not." They were 10 steps from the East Bar. A bartender in a white coat was shaking something violently in a steel tin, and the sound was so loud and so normal that Lena's brain tried to use it as a lifeline. Maybe none of this is happening. Maybe the man is drunk. Maybe... A champagne flute burst on the marble 2 feet from her left shoe. For half a second she thought someone had dropped it. Then she saw the bartender's shoulder open up, a red flower blooming through the white of his coat, and his tin hit the floor with a crash, and someone in the crowd screamed and someone else laughed, because at a gala, the first instinct when you hear something you can't explain is to assume it's a joke. It has to be a joke. This is the Aurelian for... The second shot took out a chandelier. Crystal rained. 240 people found their reflexes at the same moment, and the sound that came out of the crystal ballroom was not a scream. It was a chord. A thick, ragged, unmusical chord of pure animal fear. Chairs went over. A woman in a red dress went down under a table. The senator dropped his drink and his joke and ran, across the polished floor in $5,000 shoes. Lena did not run. She couldn't. His hand had closed around her wrist, and he was pulling her, fast but not panicked, the way you'd pull a child out of traffic if you'd been expecting the car. Head down, now. She ducked. A third shot punched through the back of the ice sculpture Marlin, and the fish's head cracked off its body in a long, slow lean and dropped. Stairwell, he said. Now. He shouldered through a service door marked Employees Only, and the noise of the ballroom cut in half, and they were in a narrow corridor of scuffed gray paint and fluorescent hum, and he was still pulling her, still not breathing hard, still moving like a man who had rehearsed this. "Who are you?" she gasped. She'd found her voice somewhere on the way through the door. "Who are you?" Not out loud, not yet. There are people dying back there. There aren't. Not yet. They weren't aiming at anybody else. You saw that, didn't you? She had. God help her, she had. The first shot had gone past her ear. Not at the bartender. The bartender had been behind her. He got her out through a loading dock she had passed 100 times without noticing, down a ramp slick with somebody's spilled ice, and into the back of a black Suburban that was already running. The driver did not turn around. The driver did not say anything. The Suburban was moving before the door had closed. Lena realized distantly that she had lost one of her shoes on the ramp. She was sitting. She didn't remember sitting. Her hands were in her lap and they were shaking again, worse now, the whole of them, and she couldn't make them stop. He was beside her. He had not let go of her wrist. His thumb was pressed very lightly over the pulse point on the inside of it, and she didn't know if he was comforting her or counting. "Breathe," he said, for the second time in 10 minutes. "Slow. In through your nose." "Who are you?" He looked at her for a long moment before he answered. In the sliding shadow and light from the street lamps coming through the tinted window, his face kept disappearing and coming back. The scar over his eyebrow showed up and vanished, like a signal she was supposed to read. "My name is Adrian Moretti," he said. She knew the name. Of course she knew the name. Anybody who had lived in New York for longer than a season knew the name. You didn't have to read the tabloids. It turned up in sentences that started with alleged and ended with declined to comment. It turned up in a federal indictment 3 years ago that had collapsed on a technicality. It had been on the cover of New York Magazine once, under a photograph taken with a long lens, under a headline that read, "The Prince of a Kingdom That Doesn't Exist." "You're—" Her mouth had gone dry. "You're him." "I'm him." "You're—" "Jesus Christ. Please don't," he said very mildly. "Yell in the car. Vincent doesn't like yelling. It makes him tense, and when Vincent gets tense, he drives like a maniac." The driver, Vincent, apparently, did not react. The driver had the build of a retired linebacker and the neck of a man who had decided, sometime around 1990, that conversation was a weakness. Lena pulled her wrist free. He let her. She slid as far away from him as the seat allowed, which wasn't far, and pressed herself against the door. And the door, she noticed without noticing, did not have a handle on the inside. "Take me back," she said. "No." "Take me back, or I swear to God I'll—" "You'll what, Lena?" For the first time, something sharper moved under his voice. Not cruelty, something older than cruelty, something tired. "You'll go to the police? The 2 cops on the Aurelian detail tonight are on Cotto's payroll. You'll go home? There's a man with a wire on your front stoop, and he's been there since Tuesday. You'll go to the diner on 9th, where you think nobody knows you work weekends. Gino knows. Gino has known for 5 months. He likes you, Lena. He hasn't told anybody yet, but he's going to, because his daughter needs surgery, and $30,000 is $30,000. She stared at him, her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I don't say any of that to frighten you," he said, quieter. "I say it so you understand what's just happened. You have not been hiding for 12 years. You have been allowed to hide. There's a difference. Tonight the permission was revoked. How do you... Later. How do you know my... Later." The Suburban turned onto the West Side Highway. The river was a black sheet on their left, pierced here and there by the reflection of a barge. Somewhere across the water, New Jersey slept with its lights on. Lena felt, with an odd and detached clarity, that she was going to be sick. She was not going to be sick. She had trained herself out of that a long time ago. You did not vomit in the back of a stranger's car. You did not vomit at all. You breathed through your nose and you counted prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, and you did not give your body permission to fall apart until you were alone. She counted. She got to 31 before her hands stopped shaking. Adrian Moretti watched her do it. He did not pretend not to. He watched her the way a man watches a flame he has been told will either warm him or burn the house down, and has not yet decided which. "You're very good," he said at last, almost to himself. "At what?" "At not falling apart." "I've had practice." "I know." 2 words, nothing in them. And something in her chest, something she had packed in ice 12 years ago and forgotten she owned, cracked straight down the middle. She turned her face to the window so he would not see it. The penthouse was in a building she had walked past, probably 50 times. A limestone tower on the East River, the kind of address that did not have its number on the awning, because if you needed to ask, you couldn't afford to know. The Suburban rolled down a private ramp into a parking level she had not known existed. 2 men in dark suits opened doors without speaking. An elevator rose 41 floors in a silence that felt pressurized, and Adrian Moretti stood with his hands in his pockets and watched the floor numbers climb and did not look at her once. The doors opened on a foyer the size of Lena's entire apartment. Black marble, a single long console table. A bowl on the console table that Lena registered with the distant bewilderment of a woman whose night had stopped making sense around 2 hours ago, held a set of keys and nothing else. No mail, no loose change, no photographs. This way. She followed him because there was nothing else to do. The apartment unfolded into a living room with a 20-foot ceiling and a wall of windows that showed the whole black sprawl of Queens across the river. A fireplace you could have stood inside. 2 low leather sofas the color of strong coffee. No art. No television. A grand piano in the far corner with the lid closed and a thin layer of dust across the top of it, which told her more about Adrian Moretti than anything else in the room. He owned a piano he did not play, and he did not care who knew it. A woman was waiting in the kitchen. 60s, silver bob, a cashmere cardigan over a white blouse. She looked like someone's grandmother, the kind who made her own pie crust. She looked at Lena with an expression Lena could not read, and then looked at Adrian with an expression Lena could read very clearly. "You brought her here. Are you out of your mind?" "Lena," he said, "this is Teresa. She runs this house. Whatever you need, she'll get. Teresa, Miss Voss will be staying with us indefinitely." "Miss Voss," Teresa said, the tiniest pause before the name. "Welcome." "I'm not staying." Nobody argued with her. That was somehow worse than if they had. Teresa produced a glass of water. Lena took it because her throat had started to hurt. The water was cold enough to shock her teeth, and she held it in her mouth longer than she needed to before she swallowed. "Teresa will show you to a room. There are clothes, there's a bathroom. Eat something if you can. We'll talk in an hour." "We'll talk now." Adrian paused in the doorway. He didn't turn around immediately. When he did, the look on his face was not unkind. It was something more complicated than unkind. It was the look of a man who had been told all his life that he could have anything he wanted, and had learned the hard way that wanting was not the same as having, and was now being reminded of the difference. "You're going to sit down in an hour," he said, "and I am going to tell you who killed your family. I am going to tell you why. I am going to tell you why you didn't die with them, and why you have been allowed to live since, and who has been paying for that privilege, and what the bill is about to come to. I am going to tell you all of it, Lena, every word. But you are going to eat something first, and you're going to put on shoes, because I am not going to have this conversation with a woman who has not eaten since lunch and has one bare foot. Do you understand me?" She stared at him. She had not told him she'd missed lunch. She had not told him about the shoe. "How do you—" "An hour," he said, and he was gone. Sometimes. The room Teresa led her to was bigger than any room Lena had slept in since she was 9 years old. The bed was made. Of course it was made. Everything in the penthouse was made, prepared, arranged in advance, as if Adrian Moretti had known for weeks that tonight she would be walking through his door. There was a robe across the foot of the bed. There were slippers on the floor. There was, on the dresser, a folded stack of clothes in what Lena realized, after a long, stupid moment of staring, was exactly her size. Her exact size. Down to the bra. She sat down on the edge of the bed because her legs had decided, without consulting her, that they were finished. Teresa stood in the doorway. She did not come in. "The bathroom is through there," Teresa said. "There's aspirin in the cabinet if you need it. There's a phone on the nightstand. It only dials in-house. If you want something to eat, press 0. "Thank you." "I made soup," Teresa said. "If you want some." People think they don't. At moments like this, they're usually wrong. Lena looked up. Teresa's face, up close, was not a grandmother's face at all. It was the face of a woman who had seen things and filed them away and chosen, on her own schedule, what to do about them. Her eyes were pale gray and very steady. "How long have you worked for him?" 31 years. "Is he—" Lena stopped. She didn't know how to finish the question. She didn't know what she was asking. Teresa waited. "Is he telling the truth?" Lena said at last. About me? About tonight? About any of it?" Teresa thought about that for a long moment. "He doesn't lie," she said finally. "Not the way you mean. He leaves things out. He leaves a lot of things out. But what he tells you will be true." She paused. "That isn't always better." Then she closed the door very softly, and Lena was alone. She did not cry. She almost did. She came as close as she'd come in years, sitting on the edge of a stranger's duvet, in a stranger's robe with a stranger's slippers on a hardwood floor that had been polished by somebody who was paid more for an hour of polishing than she made in a night at the Aurelian. She felt it rising, that long, clean wave that she had been outrunning for 12 years, and she clenched her teeth against it and waited it out. When it was gone, she stood up. She walked into the bathroom, which was larger than her kitchen. She turned on the cold tap and leaned over the sink and drank. From her cupped hands, 5 times. Her reflection in the mirror was a face she had almost forgotten the shape of. Pale, wide-eyed, the mouth too small, the cheekbones sharper than they'd been a year ago. Her mother's cheekbones. She had been trying, for 12 years, not to look like her mother. She had not entirely succeeded. She said it out loud to the woman in the glass. "Lena Voss." The name felt like a stone in her mouth. She said it again. "Lena Voss." Her mother's voice came up out of somewhere she had sealed off, saying it the way her mother had said it. "Nah." 2 syllables, the second one lifted like a question. Lena bent over the sink and gripped the marble with both hands until her knuckles went white, and she breathed, and she did not cry. When she came back into the bedroom, she put on the clothes that were exactly her size. Black slacks, a soft gray sweater, flat black shoes that fit like she had broken them in herself. She did not look at the tags. She didn't want to know what they'd cost. Then she sat in a chair by the window and watched the lights of the city she had been hiding in for 12 years. And she waited. He came for her at exactly the hour he had promised. He had changed. The black suit was gone, replaced by a charcoal sweater and dark trousers. He looked in the softer light of a reading lamp, slightly less like a man who had dragged her out of a ballroom at gunpoint, and slightly more like a man who owned a piano he did not play. Only slightly. "The study," he said. The study was smaller than the living room and warmer. Books on 3 walls, floor to ceiling, most of them cloth-bound, most of them old. A low fire and a real fireplace. 2 leather chairs and a table between them, and on the table a heavy cut-glass decanter, 2 tumblers, and a single manila folder. He poured 2 fingers of something amber into each glass and pushed one toward her without asking if she drank. She hadn't drunk in 12 years. She picked it up anyway and put her nose to it and recognized dimly that it was expensive. "Your father's name was Daniel Voss," Adrian said. She did not drink yet. He was an accountant, not a very important one on paper. He did books for 3 Brooklyn restaurants, a dry cleaner, and at the end, a construction union local in Queens that was not really a construction union local. "I know what my father was." "You know what you were told he was. You were 9. She set the glass down very carefully on the table. "Say what you came here to say, Mr. Moretti." He looked at her for a moment, A long, measuring moment. The kind of look she imagined he gave men across tables right before he decided whether they would leave the room walking. Then he opened the folder. He did not hand it to her. He laid it flat, turned it so she could see, and pushed it an inch closer. The top page was a photograph. It was grainy and it was old. It was a kitchen. Her kitchen. The kitchen of the house on Crescent Drive, with the yellow curtains her mother had sewn herself and the dog-shaped cookie jar on the counter that Lena had not let herself think about in over a decade. There were 3 bodies on the floor. Her father, her mother, her brother Thomas, who had been 11. Lena did not look away. She had trained herself over 12 years to not look away from things. But her hand, resting on the arm of the chair, turned slowly into a fist, and her nails dug half-moons into her own palm, and she did not feel them. "I know what happened," she said. Her voice was not her voice. "I was there." "You were there for part of it." Adrian's voice was very quiet. "You weren't there for all of it." "What is that?" "Turn the page." She didn't. "Turn the page, Lena." She turned the page. The second photograph was of her, 9 years old. Her hair was in 2 braids, and one of them was coming undone. She was sitting on a curb. There was blood on her hands and on the knees of her jeans and a smear of it across her cheek, and her eyes in the photograph were the eyes of something that had stopped being a child about 45 minutes before the picture was taken. She remembered the curb. She did not remember the photograph. "Who took this?" she said. "A federal agent named Howard Sachs." "I don't know that name." "No, you wouldn't. He took you out of that house, Lena. He put you in the back of a car, and he drove you to a safe house in Rockland County, and he told a very small number of very specific people that the Voss girl had died at the scene. He forged a death certificate. He buried an empty coffin. He put you into a program that does not officially exist, under a name that was not yours. And he handed your file to a man who has been paid for 12 years to make sure no one ever asks questions about why a 9-year-old with your face keeps turning up in the photographs of a Brooklyn diner." "That's..." Her mouth had gone dry again. "That's not... I was taken in by the Fergusons. Yes, in Scranton, for 3 years. I know. They were good people, Lena. I'm sorry about Mrs. Ferguson. Cancer is an ugly way to go." Her head was full of a sound like the ocean. "How do you know any of this?" He leaned forward. The firelight caught the scar over his eyebrow and did not let it go. "Because the man Howard Sachs handed your file to 12 years ago," he said, "was my father." The fire popped. Somewhere in the apartment, very far away, a clock chimed the half-hour. My father protected you, Lena. For reasons that were not, I'll be honest with you, entirely kind. For reasons I didn't understand until I was old enough to read the files he left behind. He's been dead for 18 months. And in the 18 months since he died, somebody has been very patiently, very quietly dismantling the protection he put around you. Tonight was the last piece. Tonight was a man named Paul Cotto, deciding that the last obstacle was gone, and it was time to finish a job that started in a kitchen in Queens when you were 9 years old. Why? The word barely made it out of her. Why? Why me? Why now? Why? Because of what you saw. Adrian's voice did not rise. It never rose. She was beginning to understand. It just got quieter until you had to lean in, until you were inside it. And because of what you did, but mostly, because of what you know, Lena, whether you remember knowing it or not. I know you don't. That's part of the problem. And it's part of why you're alive. If you'd remembered any of it at 20, you'd have been dead at 21. She was going to throw up. She was not going to throw up. She picked up the glass and drank it down in one swallow, and it burned all the way to her stomach, and she welcomed the burn because it was something to feel that wasn't this. What do you want from me? The words came out rougher than she'd meant. What do you want? Why am I in your apartment? Why did you come to the Aurelian? Why? I came to the Aurelian because I have known exactly where you were for 6 years, Lena. And tonight my sources told me you were going to die in that ballroom at 10:20. I made it by a minute and a half. Any other questions you have, and you're going to have a lot of them, are going to have to wait until tomorrow, because if I tell you everything in one night, You will either get on a train to Montreal by dawn, or you will put a steak knife in my throat. And I don't want either of those things to happen." He closed the folder. He did not pull it back. He left it there, between them, like an offering, or a wager. "Tonight," he said, "I want one thing from you." "What?" "I want you to stay, just until sunrise. If at sunrise you want a car to take you anywhere in the continental United States, Vincent will take you. No questions, no follow-up. I will give you a number that works, an ID that works, and $50,000 in a bag, and I will never contact you again. You have my word." "Your word," such as it is. "And if I stay past sunrise?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Then," he said, "we are going to have a very different conversation, and it is going to cost you more than you know how to count. But it is going to end with you standing on your own feet, Lena Voss, for the first time since you were 9 years old. I can't promise you it will end with you alive. I won't insult you by pretending, but I can promise you this. Whoever walks out of that ending, on whatever side, it will not be someone who got there by hiding." She sat very still in the leather chair. The fire cracked again. Somewhere in the apartment, water moved in a pipe. 31 floors below, New York went about the business of not knowing what was happening 31 floors above it. Lena Voss. The name felt, for the first time in 12 years, like it might belong to her again. And she was not sure yet whether that was a gift or a sentence. Picked up the empty glass, set it down on the manila folder so neither of them would be tempted to touch it, and looked Adrian Moretti in the eye. "I'm not going anywhere at sunrise," she said. He did not smile. She was grateful for that. If he had smiled, she would have walked out the door. "All right," he said, very softly. "Then we start in the morning." Outside, a tugboat on the river sounded its horn once, low and long, and Lena realized she had been holding her breath again, and she let it out, and she did not take another for what felt like a very long time. She did not sleep. She lay on top of the duvet in the clothes that were exactly her size, and she watched the ceiling change color 3 times as the city below her cycled through its small hours. Around 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps pass her door, slow, deliberate, not trying to be quiet, and pause for maybe a second and move on. She did not know whose footsteps they were. She did not want to know. Around 4, she got up and stood at the window. The river was a black ribbon. A single barge was moving north, its lights reflected and broken on the water. Somewhere across that water was the apartment she would never go back to, with the chipped mug on the counter and the novel she had been halfway through, and somewhere further out was the diner where a man named Gino, who had asked her twice about her weekend plans, had apparently been keeping a secret about her for 5 months. She pressed her forehead to the cold glass and let it numb her. At 6:30, Teresa knocked. "Coffee in the kitchen," Teresa said through the door. "Whenever you're ready, no rush?" There was always a rush, Lena thought. There had been a rush for 12 years. She just hadn't been the one who was aware of it. She washed her face. She did not look at her reflection for longer than it took to make sure her eyes weren't red. She walked out of the bedroom in her stockinged feet because the slippers felt like a costume, and she followed the smell of coffee down a hallway lined with framed black and white photographs that she did not let herself examine too closely, because something in her peripheral vision told her at least one of them was of a child, and she could not handle a child right now. Adrian was in the kitchen. He was in the kitchen the way certain men are in kitchens, like he owned it and did not use it. He was leaning against the island, a white mug in one hand, the morning light from the wall of windows cutting hard across the side of his face. He was wearing a dark blue sweater and jeans, which somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. He had not shaved. He looked up when she came in and did something with his face that wasn't a smile, but acknowledged her as a person, which was, she decided, about all she was willing to accept. "Coffee," Teresa said from the stove, and pushed a mug across the marble toward her. "Cream's there. Sugar if you want it. There's eggs, toast, fruit. Just coffee." "Eggs," Teresa said, not asking. Lena sat down on the stool where the mug was. The coffee was black and very hot and almost painful to swallow, and she welcomed that too. Adrian watched her over the rim of his own cup. "You didn't sleep." "No." "That's going to be a problem eventually." "Eventually isn't now." He made a small sound that might have been a laugh if it had been willing to commit. He set his cup down on the island and pushed it away with 2 fingers, as if to clear a space between them. "Ask me anything," he said. She had thought about this for 4 hours. She had lined the questions up in her head like stones, turned each one over, decided which one to start with. And now, with him standing 3 feet away and the morning light making his scar look like a seam, every one of them went out of her head at once. Who is Paul Cotto? Start with the easy one. Okay. He picked up his cup again. He did not drink from it. Paul Cotto is a man my father knew for 40 years. They started in the same neighborhood. Bay Ridge. Cotto was the son of a butcher. My father was the son of a man who ran numbers out of the back of a laundromat. In 1983, they were 19 years old and they were best friends. And by 1991, they were running 2 different crews out of 2 different parts of Brooklyn. And by 1998, they were at war. You follow? Yes. Good. He paused. Your father was my father's accountant, not Cotto's. That matters. Keep that in mind. Okay. In 2012, he stopped. He set the cup down again. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked not uncertain, but careful. The way a man walks on a floor he suspects of being rotten. In 2012, your father came into possession of certain documents, a ledger, specifically, an accounting of payments made over about 11 years from various sources to certain individuals who were in a position to make those payments very useful. Federal prosecutors, 2 judges, a deputy commissioner in the NYPD, some people in Albany. The kind of list that, if it came out, doesn't just take down one organization. It takes down a whole ecosystem. Do you understand what I'm describing? Yes. Your father stole it. From your father? No. He looked at her steadily. From Cotto. Why? That, Adrian said, is a question I have been trying to answer for 12 years. Lena's coffee had gone down to a temperature she could actually taste. It was good coffee. Everything in this apartment was good. She hated it a little. And my mother, she said. My brother. Cotto sent 4 men to your house on the night of March 14th, 2014. They were not supposed to kill anybody. They were supposed to take your father into a car and drive him to a warehouse in Red Hook, where a conversation was going to happen about the location of the ledger. Your father was not cooperative. Your mother was not cooperative. Your brother, his jaw worked once. Your brother tried to reach a telephone. One of the 4 men panicked. Things went very badly, very quickly. She did not say anything. She did not have to say anything. Her hands were around the coffee mug and she was looking at her hands. And her hands looked in the clear morning light, very small. And she was trying to remember if they had been this small when they were 9 years old and covered in her brother's blood. You were in the pantry, Adrian said very quietly. Your mother pushed you in and closed the door. The men didn't know you were in the house. They were told your father had a son. They weren't told about a daughter. I came out. Yes. I don't remember coming out. No. I remember... She stopped. Her voice had climbed an octave she did not want it at. She pulled it down. I remember the curb. I remember a man putting a blanket around me. I don't remember what happened in between. I know. You don't know. You weren't there. No, I wasn't. He paused. But I've read the file. What file? Howard Sachs's file. How did you get Howard Sachs's file? Howard Sachs is dead, Lena. He died of an aneurysm 6 months ago in a 2-bedroom condo in Fort Lauderdale that he could not possibly have afforded on a federal pension. My father's lawyer, my lawyer now, went through his things. The file was in a safe that had not been opened in 11 years, along with some other things. What other things? He hesitated. It was the first real hesitation she had seen from him, and it made her sit up straighter. A photograph of you, he said at last. At 15, in a field hockey uniform, taken from across a parking lot with a telephoto lens. She set the coffee down. He was watching me. He was watching over you. There is a difference. A small one, maybe, but there is one. Howard Sachs was the reason you were not killed at 12, at 13, at 16, when you were almost in a car accident that was not an accident, at 20, when you applied for a community college in Pennsylvania and somebody flagged your social security number. He was also the reason you spent the last 12 years of your life in an approximation of a life that was never going to be more than an approximation. Both things are true. And now he's dead. Yes. And your father is dead. Yes. And I'm not protected anymore. No. And Kato knows where I am. Kato has known where you were for about 11 weeks, Lena. He has been waiting. For what? For an opportunity that wouldn't cost him too much. The Aurelian was perfect. A public venue, plausible deniability, a lot of witnesses who would remember gunfire, but not the specific target, and enough chaos that a body could be walked out a side door before anyone counted heads. He had 3 shooters on the floor and a cleanup crew in a van on 57th. He had been planning it for 9 days. And you had been planning this for how long? He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. About 3 years, he said. Teresa, at the stove, did not turn around, but her shoulders went very still, and Lena understood that this was a piece of information Teresa was hearing for the first time too, and she understood something else, which was that Adrian Moretti did not say things he had not already decided to say, and he had decided, for reasons of his own, to let her see him do it. 3 years, Lena said. 3 years. Doing what? Reading files, hiring people, getting into position, making sure that if the day came when I had to walk into a hotel ballroom and take a stranger out of it, there would be a car running on the ramp and a bed made on the 41st floor and a pot of coffee on a stove in the morning. Why? It came out smaller than she wanted. That, he said, is a longer conversation, and I don't think we have time for it this morning. Eat your eggs. Teresa had, at some point Lena hadn't noticed, set a plate in front of her. 2 eggs, scrambled soft, a triangle of buttered toast, 3 slices of an orange arranged on the side of the plate with a care that caught in Lena's throat. Nobody had arranged food for her in a long time. She ate. She did not want to. Her stomach had not wanted anything since the first shot had gone past her ear the night before. But she ate, because Teresa was watching and Adrian was watching, and she was not going to be the woman who couldn't eat. She had been a lot of things in her life. She was not going to be that. Halfway through the eggs, she said, without looking up, "Tell me about the arrangement." The what? You said last night. We start in the morning. That implies there's something we're starting. Tell me what it is. It can wait an hour? It can wait until I finish this plate. Tell me. He was quiet for long enough that she looked up. He was looking at her with something she could not read. It wasn't approval. Approval wasn't in his face's vocabulary, she was starting to think. It was something closer to recognition. The way you look at a tool you'd forgotten you owned and picked up and found it was heavier than you remembered. All right, he said. In about 48 hours, there is going to be a charity dinner at the Belmont Club. 200 people. Mayor will be there. 2 senators. Approximately 11 people we care about, of whom 4 are ours and 7 are Kato's or friendly to Kato. I'm going to attend this dinner. I'm going to attend it with a woman on my arm. That woman is going to be introduced as my fiancée. Her name is going to be Elena Moretti Marsh, and the story is going to be that we met 2 years ago at a gallery opening in Milan, and that we have been very private about our relationship because of my profile. She set her fork down. You want me to pretend to be engaged to you? Yes. In public? Yes. In front of the mayor? The mayor doesn't matter. The mayor is furniture. The 7 people who matter need to see you beside me and understand without a word being spoken that touching you touches me. That is a different equation than the one they were working with yesterday. It buys us time, possibly a great deal of time. And why would they believe I'm... Because I'm going to spend the next 48 hours making sure they do. Meaning what? Meaning a press release at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Meaning a photograph at a restaurant tonight that will be in 3 papers by morning. Meaning a ring on your hand that is going to be valued when somebody inevitably looks it up at just enough money to be ridiculous but not enough to be vulgar. Meaning a dress at the Belmont Club that is going to cost Lena more than your last car, and you are not going to think about the number on the tag because thinking about it will be written on your face, and we cannot afford that. She stared at him. She had all her life been a woman who stared. Her mother had scolded her for it. Thomas had mocked her for it. The Fergusons had told her gently that she looked at people as if she were appraising them, and that some people found it unnerving. She had tried to stop, She had not entirely succeeded. She stared at Adrian Moretti now, and she said, "No." "No what? No to the ring? No to the dress? No to the fiancé, the photograph, all of it. No, I am not going to marry you in the papers, Mr. Moretti. I don't know you. I don't want to know you. I am not a prop." "I agree with you." "I agree with you," he said again, evenly. "You are not a prop. You are a woman whose family was killed in front of her, and who has been managed for 12 years by people who had their own reasons for managing her. I am not going to be another of those people. I am offering you an arrangement. If you say no, I will respect that. You can walk out of this building with the $50,000 and the working papers, and you can take Vincent to a train station, and you will be dead, Lena. You will be dead inside the week, because without the story I am about to put in the papers, you are the cheapest kill in the 5 boroughs. I am not threatening you. I am telling you the price of your no." She picked up the fork again because her hands needed something to do. "Why this?" she said. "Why the fiancé? Why not a safe house in Connecticut? Why not? You have resources. Because a safe house gets you 3 weeks. A visible engagement gets you 3 months. And I don't need forever. I need 3 months. In 3 months I can finish what I started, and in 3 months you can decide what you want the rest of your life to look like. But to get there, we have to pass through the next 72 hours. And to pass through the next 72 hours, I need every person in this city who wants you dead to believe that killing you means going to war with me. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Say it back to me." "I understand." "Good." He pushed away from the island. "We have a stylist coming at 10. She is discreet. She has been dressing my family since I was a child. She will not ask questions. She will not know your real name. She will know only that you are to be photographed tonight, and that the photographs are to be flattering without being obvious, and that anything you want you may have. Be polite to her. She likes to be thanked." Adrian. It was the first time she had used his name. She heard it in her own mouth and was briefly disoriented by it. He stopped in the doorway. "Yes." "If I do this." She looked down at her plate. The orange slices, the careful way they had been cut. If I say yes to this, what happens to me after? 3 months, 6 months, a year? What am I, when this is over?" He did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower than it had been, and she realized with a small cold shock that he had thought about this, that he had maybe been thinking about it for the 3 years he had been reading her file. "That's up to you, Lena." "That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have. I don't know what you are on the other side of this. Neither do you. Neither does anyone. There are people who will tell you otherwise over the next few weeks. Some of them will be kind, some of them will be clever. Don't listen to any of them. The only person who gets to decide what Lena Voss is after this is Lena Voss. That is the only thing I can promise you, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you live long enough to make the decision." He left. Teresa, without turning around, said, "He means it, you know." "I know." "I'm not sure you do." Lena looked up. Teresa was looking at her now. The gray eyes were very steady. There was flour on her sleeve. She had started something, a bread maybe, while Lena had been absorbing the end of her old life. "I watched him grow up," Teresa said. "I watched his father grow up, for that matter. They are not the same man. The boy you met last night is—" She paused, looking for the word. "He is trying to be better than the thing he came from. Most days he succeeds. Some days he doesn't. On the days he doesn't, he knows it. That's more than most of them ever manage." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're going to be in this house for a while, and it will be easier on all of us if you understand what kind of house it is." She turned back to the stove. "Finish your eggs." Lena finished the eggs. They were very good. She hated that too. The stylist came at 10, and she was a small, sharp-faced woman in her 50s with a tape measure draped around her neck like a priest's stole in a leather bag that seemed impossibly to contain entire dresses. She did not introduce herself. She looked Lena up and down once, quickly, the way a doctor looks at an X-ray, and said, "All right, stand up straight, turn, stop, again. Good." For 2 hours she was measured and draped and pinned. She was held by the wrist, by the elbow, by the waist, by people she had never met and would probably never see again. A second woman came in and did her hair. Cut it first, 3 inches gone in under a minute. A transformation so quick and so competent that Lena watched it happen in a hand mirror and did not recognize the woman in the glass. A third came in and did her nails, her eyebrows, things Lena had not known people did professionally to other people. Nobody asked her a question. Nobody used her name. When it was over, she looked in the full-length mirror in the corner of the dressing room like a woman who had spent 12 years in rooms she had never been allowed to enter. She did not like it. It was, she thought, going to be very easy to start liking it. That was what she did not like. Adrian came in around 1. He looked at her for a long moment. He did not say you look beautiful, and she was grateful for that because she would have had to slap him for it, and the dress she was wearing was not built for slapping. That one, he said to the stylist, plus the dark one from the garment bag for tonight. Everything else can go home with you and come back Wednesday. Yes, Mr. Moretti. Thank you, Paula. The stylist smiled at him. It was the first time Lena had seen anyone in this house smile at him like that. Warm, uncomplicated, the way you smiled at a child you had watched grow up. Paula patted his cheek, actually patted his cheek, and gathered her things and went. He and Lena were alone. She's done, he said. You have maybe an hour to yourself before we have to leave. Sleep if you can. There's a room off the library that's quieter than the one you were in last night. Teresa will show you. I'm not going to sleep. No, I didn't think so. He paused. Lena. Yes. Tonight, at the restaurant. I need you to do a thing I know is going to be hard. I need you to laugh at something I say. At least once. Where the photographer can see. It doesn't have to be a big laugh. A smile with your eyes will do. But if you sit across from me for 90 minutes and look like a hostage, we have wasted an evening and lost 7 hours we can't afford to lose. I don't know how to laugh at you. I don't particularly know how to be funny. We'll muddle through. What if I can't? Then we will move to Plan B, and Plan B is considerably worse for both of us. Adrian? Yes. She took a breath. She had done a lot of careful breathing in the last 12 hours, and she was starting to resent how much work it was taking. Last night, she said, in the car, you said you'd known where I was for 6 years. Yes. Before that? No. Your father? Yes. So your father knew where I was from when I was 9, and you found out when I was 25? Yes. How? I found a file in a drawer I wasn't supposed to open. And what did you do with it? He looked at her. The scar did its small vanishing trick in the light. I closed the drawer, Lena. For how long? 4 months. And then I opened it again, and I read it, and I sat at my father's desk for most of a night, and at dawn, I made a decision that I have been carrying out, in pieces, every day since. That is as honest as I know how to be with you right now. You can ask me the rest of it when we have the time. What was the decision? He was quiet. That what had happened to you, he said at last, was not going to be something our family got away with, and that when the day came that you needed someone who knew what your name was, it was not going to be Cotto, and it was not going to be the FBI, and it was not going to be a stranger on a curb with a blanket. It was going to be me. That was the decision. She did not know what to do with that. She had been prepared over the course of 12 hours for him to be calculating, for him to be cold, for him to be using her for some angle she had not yet identified, and she was still fairly sure that he was, because men like Adrian Moretti did not do anything for a single reason. But she had not been prepared for the other thing, the thing underneath the calculation, the thing that had made him say, that is as honest as I know how to be. She did not know what to do with that, so she did what she had done for 12 years. She put it somewhere and closed the door on it, and she turned to the mirror and adjusted a seam on a dress that did not need adjusting. And she said to her reflection, "What time do we leave?" 7. I'll be ready at 7. I know you will. He left her alone in the dressing room, and she stood in front of the mirror for a long time. And the woman in the glass stood there too, and neither of them said anything to the other one. The restaurant was a place she had never heard of, which was, she was starting to understand, how you knew it was the kind of place she should have heard of if she'd been a different person. It was on the 50-something floor of a building on Park, and it had 12 tables, and the maitre d' greeted Adrian by his first name and did not greet Lena at all, which the stylist had told her in a quick, low voice in the car, was exactly right. They know who you are, Paola had said, because you are with him. Do not introduce yourself. Do not explain yourself. You are only explained by the fact that he chose you. The photographer, Adrian had said, would be on the sidewalk when they left, not when they arrived. They sat at a corner table by a window that showed the whole glittering south face of Midtown, and she ordered, because he told her to, something she could not pronounce. And he ordered a wine she did not recognize from a list he did not open. The sommelier brought it. The sommelier poured it. The sommelier vanished. Okay, Adrian said quietly, once they were alone in the way you could be alone in a room with 11 other tables. The next 90 minutes, we are two people having a meal. You are allowed to be quiet. You are not allowed to look afraid. If you feel afraid, drink some water. Don't grip the glass. Hold it at the stem. Put it down gently. You've waited tables. You know what it looks like when someone is tense at a restaurant. Do none of those things. What do I look like when I'm not afraid? I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. She looked at him. He looked back, and his mouth did something that on another man she would have called a smile. And she understood, with a small electric jolt, that he had meant that as a joke. He had been trying to make her laugh. It was the worst joke she had ever heard, and she almost did laugh, almost, out of sheer surprise, and she caught it at the last second and turned it into a breath and held his eye and said, "Work on your material. I am not naturally gifted." "No. I've been told." "By whom?" "By everyone." And that time she did laugh. One small, quick laugh, more of an exhale than a sound, and she covered it with her wine glass, and she saw, in the polished brass of the wall panel behind him, her own reflection. A woman with an unfamiliar haircut and a dark dress, and a laugh that had been surprised out of her by a man she had known for 19 hours. And she did not recognize that woman either. They got through the dinner. She remembered afterward almost none of it. She remembered a thin slice of something orange on a black plate. She remembered him asking her if she had ever been to Rome. She hadn't. And then telling her, for 6 or 7 minutes, about a particular small street in Trastevere where the best espresso in the world could be had for €1. And she remembered that he did not look at her while he told it, which was a kindness she had not expected, because it gave her the space to listen without being watched. She remembered him paying the bill. She remembered him putting his hand lightly on the small of her back as they walked toward the door, and she remembered that her body did not flinch this time, and she remembered hating that her body did not flinch this time. On the sidewalk, the photographer was exactly where he had been told to be. He was not trying to hide. A thin man in a gray coat, a long-lens camera slung from his neck. He lifted it as they came out. He took 4 shots. Adrian, without missing a step, turned his head slightly toward her and said something soft and meaningless into her hair, and she looked up at him as if he had said something that mattered, and the photographer got what he had come for, and the car was there, and they were in it, and the door closed, and Vincent pulled away from the curb. She let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. "You did well," Adrian said. "Don't." "All right." They did not speak again until the Suburban was halfway back to the penthouse. Then she said, without looking at him, "What was the thing you said?" "When?" "When he took the picture." "What did you say?" He was quiet for a moment. "I said I hated your shoes." She turned her head. He was looking out the window. The lights of Park Avenue slid across his face, and she saw for the first time that he was tired. Not physically. Something older than physical. The look of a man who had been running a calculation in his head continuously for about 18 hours and had maybe just been given permission, for 2 blocks, to stop. "My shoes. They're too high. You don't walk in them. You march. It's going to give you away before any of the rest of it does." "I'll practice." "Good." He turned his head and looked at her. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For the laugh. I wasn't sure you'd give me one." She did not answer. She did not know what the answer was. The Suburban moved north along the river, and she watched the dark water, and somewhere on the other side of it was the life she used to have, which had been small and frightened and hers, and somewhere on this side of it was the life she was apparently starting, which was enormous and frightening, and not hers yet, and she did not know, as the lights of the Queensboro slid past her window, which of those lives she was more afraid of. She only knew that for the first time in 12 years, she was not sure, when she said the word home, which direction she meant. The photograph ran on page 3 of the Post by 7 the next morning. By 8, it was on 2 gossip blogs with adjectives attached that she did not recognize as referring to her. By 9, a woman in a blouse with a small gold horse pin was on the television in the kitchen saying the words mystery brunette and longtime confirmed bachelor, and Teresa changed the channel without comment, and Lena pretended not to have heard. The ring came at 10. It came in a velvet box the size of a deck of cards, delivered by a man in a dark suit who said nothing and left nothing and was gone before Lena had registered that he had been there. Adrian opened the box in the kitchen and turned it toward her, and she looked down at a stone that caught the morning light the way a small, clean body of water catches it, and she did not touch it. "Try it," he said. "I'd rather not. You need to know if it fits. If we have to resize it in public, we have a problem." "How do you know my ring size?" "The stylist measured you yesterday." "I don't remember being measured." "No, you wouldn't. It was done quickly." She looked at him. "What else was done quickly?" He paused. It was a fair question, and he knew it was a fair question, and he did not lie, which was, she was starting to understand, the specific thing he did instead of lying. He paused, visibly, while he decided how much of the truth to give her. "Your clothing sizes," he said. "Shoe size, inseam, the brand of toothpaste you prefer," which is stupid, but Teresa wanted to know. "The name of your cat, which you don't have anymore, but which your landlord in Scranton remembered you crying about at 14, your blood type, your prescription, if you needed one, which you don't, the coffee order you had at the diner on 9th 2 Saturdays in a row. That's about it. That's about it. Yes, my cat. Her name was Margaret. According to your landlord, she was an unusually unpleasant animal. I'm sorry for your loss. She was named after a character in a book my mother liked. I know. You know. I know." She reached into the box and took out the ring. It was heavier than she expected. She slid it onto her finger. It fit. Of course it fit. She did not look at Adrian when she put it on. She looked out the window, at the bright cold river, and she held her own hand out in front of her and looked at it as if it belonged to someone else. "I don't like it," she said. "The ring. Any of it. I know. When this is over, you can throw it in the river. I don't care. I will drive you to the bridge myself. I prefer the Verrazzano. Any bridge you want." The Belmont Club dinner was that night. The stylist came back at 4. This time the dress was a deeper color, not quite black, something between ink and wine. It had a neckline that Lena had to be talked into. It had sleeves that ended just below the elbow. When she stood in front of the mirror in the dressing room, she did not recognize herself, and this time she did not hate it, which was worse than hating it, because hating it would have been simpler. Adrian was waiting for her by the elevator at 7. He was in a black suit again, no tie again, and the lion pin was on his lapel. Hell again, and he looked at her without speaking for a second long enough to be noticeable, and then he held out his arm. "Lena." "Yes, tonight is different from last night. Last night was a photograph. Tonight is a room. In that room, there are going to be 11 people who are specifically paying attention to you. At least 3 of them are going to try to speak to you alone. Do not let them. If anyone asks you to step away, you laugh and say, 'Oh, Adrian hates when I wander off,' and you put your hand on my arm, and I will come find you inside of 30 seconds. Do you understand?" "Which 3? A woman named Celeste Dumont, who writes for Vanity Fair but is really gathering for Cotto. A gentleman named Father Michael Kerrigan, who is a priest and is also not a priest. You'll know him by a scar on his throat. And a tall blond man in his 40s who will introduce himself as a deputy U.S. attorney named Wyatt Halverson. Halverson is the most dangerous of the 3. He is a very good liar, and he will try to make you feel safe. Do not feel safe." "Is he federal?" "He is exactly as federal as he claims to be, and that is part of the problem. He has been on Cotto's payroll for 8 years. My father paid him for about 5 of those. He has taken money from 4 different organizations simultaneously, which is, if nothing else, impressive. Why would a federal prosecutor want me? Because you are, he believes, the living, breathing, final piece of a puzzle that could end him. He is correct about that. He has spent a great deal of money over a great many years making sure you do not remember things you might one day remember, and he will spend more money tonight, in the form of flattery and champagne, trying to make sure you still don't. What do I say to him? Say very little. Smile with your mouth and not your eyes. Let him do the work. Men like Halverson are only dangerous when they think they are being listened to. All right. Lena. Yes. If anything goes wrong tonight, anything, you do not run for the door. You walk, you do not run, to the kitchen, through the double doors past the bar. Vincent will be in the alley. The alley is our alley. Everyone in that kitchen tonight is ours. Do you understand? Yes. Say it back to me. I walk to the kitchen. I don't run. Good. He guided her into the elevator and the doors closed, and for 41 floors neither of them spoke. She watched their two reflections in the polished brass of the panel beside the buttons. She watched a woman in a dark dress standing next to a man in a dark suit, and she watched the woman's mouth set itself into a line that could be mistaken for composure. And she watched her own hand find the edge of his sleeve and rest there, lightly. Because she needed it to, and because in 3 minutes she was going to need to have already been doing it. And practice, Paola had said in the car yesterday, practice was everything. Adrian looked down at her hand on his sleeve. He did not say anything about it, but she felt, through the wool of the jacket, the smallest shift in him, a breath let out that he had not let out before, and she understood that she had, without meaning to, done a thing that mattered. The Belmont Club had the kind of entrance that pretended it did not want to be seen. A narrow door between two limestone buildings, a discreet brass plaque, a man in a long coat who opened the door without looking at the person he was opening it for, because looking was, at the Belmont Club, considered vulgar. Inside, a small vestibule. A woman in black took her coat. A second woman in black took Adrian's. A staircase curved up out of sight, and from the top of it came the low, civilized hum of 200 people pretending to be delighted to see each other. Adrian paused at the foot of the stairs. Ready? No, neither am I. He adjusted her hand on his arm, moved it half an inch higher, and tucked his own hand over the top of hers so it stayed. We go up slow. You smile when I smile. If anyone says congratulations, you say thank you, we're very happy, and that's all. Let me answer anything beyond that. You are, for the next 3 hours, a woman in love. It does not matter whether you are good at it. It matters that you do not look like you are trying. Adrian. Yes, I have not been a woman in love in my life. I don't know what it looks like. He looked at her for a second. It looks like you right now, he said, pretending you don't know what it looks like. And he started up the stairs before she could respond to that, which was probably, she thought, the point. The room at the top was ballroom scale but warmer, low gold light, a long buffet along one wall, a string trio in a corner, not Debussy this time, something American and slow. Heads turned when they came in. They turned in the way that heads turn at a room like this, which was not visibly. Nobody looked directly at them for more than a half second, but the air changed, and a certain density of conversation near the door stopped for a beat and started again. A man detached himself from a group of 4 and came toward them, both hands out. Adrian, Senator. And, well, this is the famous Elena, Adrian said. Elena, this is Senator Orrin Brandt. Orrin. Elena Marsh. Marsh. Tell me, dear, are you... Not those marshes, Lena said, smiling. I wish. It came out of her mouth before she had thought about it, and she felt Adrian's hand tighten, for an instant, over hers. Approval, she realized, with a small, strange jolt of something that was almost pride. And the senator laughed. Exactly the wrong kind of laugh. The laugh of a man who was not sure whether he had just been insulted, but was going to pretend he hadn't, and moved on to an anecdote that lasted 3 minutes and required nothing of her but a tilt of the head. After the senator, there was a woman in emerald green. After the woman in emerald green, there was a man who owned something, a shipping line or a hockey team, she did not catch which. After him, there was a couple from Greenwich whose name she forgot the instant she heard it. The faces began to run together. The words, "Congratulations, lucky man. When's the date? Milan, was it?" came at her in slightly different arrangements, and she said, "Thank you. We're very happy, and we haven't set one. And yes, 2 years ago this March." In that order, over and over, the way she had once recited the specials at the Aurelian, and the ring on her finger caught the low gold light and did what a ring like that was meant to do, which was make conversation about the ring and not about her. Somewhere around the 40-minute mark, she realized she had been standing beside Adrian Moretti for 40 minutes and had not been afraid for any of them. The realization was so strange that it almost knocked her off balance. She looked down at her own hand on his sleeve. It was not shaking. It had not shaken since they came up the stairs. She had, without noticing, stopped counting prime numbers. Then a voice behind her right shoulder said, "Miss Marsh?" She turned. The man was tall, blonde, going gray. 40-something, she would have said, though he had the kind of face that could have been 38 or 48 depending on the light. Good suit, better tie, a federal pin of some kind on the lapel, just visible. He was smiling the way a man smiles when he has been trained to smile, which is to say, with all of his face except his eyes. Wyatt Halverson, Deputy U.S. Attorney for the Southern District. I don't mean to interrupt. Adrian, I'm so sorry. I just wanted very briefly to say hello to your fiancé. There's some business I've been meaning to discuss with you, and I wondered if Miss Marsh and I might steal 2 minutes while you handle it. I don't think, Adrian started. It's all right, Lena said. She felt Adrian go still beside her. She did not look at him. She smiled, with her mouth and not her eyes, exactly the way he had told her to, and she said, 2 minutes is fine. Mr. Halverson, was it? You can bring me back here when we're done, and Adrian can pretend not to notice you've stolen me. Halverson laughed. It was a practiced laugh. He offered his arm. She took it. Adrian did not stop her. He did not speak. She felt the weight of his eyes on her back for the full 5 steps it took her to walk away from him on Wyatt Halverson's elbow. And then a waiter stepped between them, and the line of sight broke, and she was on her own. 2 minutes, she said to Halverson as they walked. I meant that. Understood. I'm a man who respects a clock. He steered her politely toward a small alcove off the main room. 2 chairs, a low table, a plant in a brass pot. Private enough to talk in, public enough to not be alarming. He gestured at one chair. She sat. He took the other. He did not sit close. That was good. She had expected him to sit close. I'm going to be direct with you, Miss Marsh, or may I call you Lena? Elena is fine. Elena. He smiled. Of course. I'm going to be direct, Elena, because I think we're both busy people and I don't want to waste your evening. I know who you are. She did not react. She had practiced not reacting for 12 years, and she had practiced not reacting all afternoon, and she had practiced not reacting for the last 40 minutes. And now, when the moment came, she was grateful for every hour of it. Her face did not move. Her pulse did not rise, as far as she could tell. She tilted her head in a small, polite question and waited. I've known who you are for a long time, Halverson said. A very long time. I was part of a task force years ago that took an interest in you. The interest was protective. I want to be clear about that. You were 9 years old. We lost a great deal of sleep over you. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. He smiled when he said it, so she smiled back, and between the 2 smiles, the air in the alcove cooled by about 10 degrees. The man you came in with tonight, Elena, he said, quietly, leaning forward only slightly, is not a safe person. I think you know that. I think you probably knew that before he ever brought you through that door. What I'd like you to consider is that the person offering to keep you safe doesn't always have to be the scariest person in the room. Sometimes the scariest person in the room is the one you need protection from. Are you offering me protection, Mr. Halverson? I'm offering you options. That's all. A woman in your position should have options. And what is my position? Leverage. He said it simply, almost kindly. You are leverage, Elena, against 3 separate organizations, and the man who's currently holding you is going to spend you like a chip. I don't blame him for it. He's doing what men like him do. I'd just like you to know that there are other rooms in this city and other people in those rooms, and some of those people are in a position to offer you something more than 3 months of being photographed in expensive dresses. She looked at him. She looked at him, really looked at him, and she saw, under the good suit and the federal pin and the trained smile, a specific kind of man she recognized. She had served men like him at the Aurelian. They left 20% tips because 18 was cheap and 25 was gauche. They held doors for women, but not for the woman behind the woman. They were, every one of them, a kind of nobody who had trained himself into the shape of a somebody, and they were dangerous. Adrian had been right about that because they were always hungry, but she had handed their plates to them. She had cleared their glasses. She had, from behind the false invisibility of a waitress's black apron, watched them talk, for 12 years. She knew what they looked like when they were lying. Wyatt Halverson was lying. "Mr. Halverson," she said, "may I ask you a question?" "Of course. 8 years ago, or possibly 9, somebody paid a man at a community college in Scranton to flag a social security number. Do you remember the name on that social security number?" Halverson did not react. He did not react the way he had taught himself not to react, which was to say, he reacted perfectly. Which was to say, he did not react at all, and that was her answer. "I'd have to check my records," he said pleasantly. "Why do you ask?" "No reason. You seem like a young woman with very good instincts, Elena." "Thank you." "I mean that." "I know you do." She stood up. He stood up with her, automatically, because he was a man who had been raised to stand up when a woman stood up. And in the small second when he was halfway out of his chair and not quite balanced, she put her hand, very lightly, on his forearm and said, close enough for only him to hear, "I think you should go back to the bar, Mr. Halverson, and I think we should not speak again tonight. And I think that if you try to speak to me again tonight, the man I came in with is going to find out you did, and I do not think you want that. Do we understand each other?" "Quiet." He looked at her. For 1/2 of 1 second his face dropped its practiced smile, and she saw underneath it the thing she had suspected was there. A flat, cold, entirely unsurprised ugliness, and then the smile came back, perfectly in place, and he said, "Of course. Enjoy your evening, Miss Marsh. Congratulations." "Thank you. We're very happy." She walked back to Adrian without looking behind her. He was where she had left him, which was, she would understand later, not a coincidence. He had not moved the whole time because moving would have made it harder for her to find him. He was talking to a small, sharp-faced woman in cream, and the small, sharp-faced woman was Celeste Dumont. And Celeste was laughing the wrong kind of laugh, and Adrian was letting her, and Lena walked up and put her hand back on his arm and said, "Sorry, darling, the deputy had a question about a charity." Adrian looked down at her. For a second his eyes searched hers, and she made, with the smallest tightening of her fingers on his sleeve, a signal they had not agreed on and did not need to have agreed on, because he understood it later. "Celeste," Adrian said, "this is Elena. Elena Celeste Dumont. She writes things." "I write things," Celeste said, smiling. "He makes me sound like a columnist at a racing paper. Elena, you are a vision. Where did he find you?" "Milan." "Of course, Milan." Celeste laughed. "Adrian, you are so predictable. A gallery?" "A restaurant," Adrian said. "Which one?" "You wouldn't know it." "Try me." "No." Celeste laughed again, harder this time, and squeezed his arm, and turned to scan the room for better material. And Lena registered. She registered with a small, cold precision that this woman had been trying to pin down a verifiable detail, and Adrian had not given her one, and Celeste had not actually expected him to. "Adrian," Lena said quietly, when Celeste had drifted, "I'd like to sit down. Now. Now." They moved toward one of the tables along the wall. He pulled a chair out for her. He sat down next to her, close, and leaned in as if to whisper something sweet, and under his breath he said, "What did he say?" "He knows my name." "Which name?" "Both." Adrian's hand, resting on the back of her chair, did not move. His face did not change, but the air next to her went the way the air had gone at the bottom of the Aurelian stairwell, and she understood without him saying anything that he was doing something very fast on the inside of his head, and that the result of it was not going to be pleasant for Wyatt Halverson. "Did he say what he wanted?" "He made an offer, protection, other rooms. That phrase, other rooms in this city." "Okay." "He knows about the Scranton thing, the community college." "Okay." "He didn't deny it." "Okay." "Adrian." "I hear you, Lena. I am not angry with you. I am calibrating." "Calibrating?" "I did not expect him to move tonight. I expected him to make contact next week at the earliest. He moved tonight, which means he is either more frightened than I thought he was, or more arrogant than I thought he was, and the difference matters." "Which is it?" "Frightened," Adrian said. "He's frightened. He came at you himself instead of sending someone. He wouldn't have done that if he had options. We have more leverage than I realized." She looked at him. He was still leaning into her, close enough that to any of the 11 or 200 people in the room, they were two lovers trading a private moment at a table. His hand was still on the back of her chair. His eyes, up close, had very small gold flecks in the slate gray that she had not noticed in any other light. Adrian. Yes. Something is wrong. I know. Not with us, with the room. He went still. What do you see? The waiter at the far end of the bar, the one with the dark hair. He's been watching us for 7 minutes. He's a waiter. He's not. He has the wrong shoes. The others are in black loafers, soft soles. His are leather-soled. He's making noise when he walks. I've been listening. Adrian looked at her for a beat. Then, very slowly, without turning his head, his eyes flicked to the far end of the bar. You're right. What does it mean? It means the dinner is over. Stand up, now. The kitchen. No, not the kitchen, not tonight. They've seen the kitchen plan. They have someone at the kitchen door. I can feel it. Stand up, laugh at something I said, put your hand on my arm. We are going to walk out the front. You said, I know what I said. I was wrong. Stand up. She stood up. She laughed at nothing, and she put her hand on his arm, and he folded his other hand over hers and smiled down at her with a tenderness that was entirely, completely fake and entirely, completely convincing. And together they walked across the floor of the Belmont Club ballroom toward the staircase, and the string trio played something slow, and she could feel, without looking, the dark-haired man at the bar shift his weight and begin casually to move. Adrian. I see him. I see him, Lena. Keep walking. They were at the top of the stairs. She could see through the vestibule doors below a sliver of street, a town car. Her heart was doing the thing it had done at the Aurelian, the thing it had trained itself out of doing a long time ago and was now rediscovering on a daily basis. Slow, Adrian said very quietly. Slow. 3 more steps. 3 steps. 2, 1. The woman in black at the cloakroom was already holding their coats out, and her face was carefully empty, and Lena understood in one cold flash that Adrian had signaled her, when she did not know, from across a room, with an eyebrow maybe, in some dialect of gesture she did not yet speak, and the woman had understood him and was getting them out. Ma'am, the woman said, and slid Lena's coat over her shoulders, and her hands, very briefly, brushed the small of Lena's back, and Lena felt, through the dress, something small and hard pressed flat against her spine. She did not flinch. She did not look. The woman's hand was already gone. Thank you, Lena said. Good night, ma'am. They were out the door. They were down the steps. The town car was at the curb. Vincent was behind the wheel. The back door was already open. Adrian handed her in, not rough but not gentle, and climbed in after her, and the door closed, and Vincent was moving before Adrian had even sat down. Down, Adrian said. What? Down. He pushed her, not violently, flat across the leather seat, and he put himself between her and the window, and 3 seconds later a sound like a hard slap hit the side of the car and did not break the glass. And there was another slap, and another, and Vincent did not swerve and did not speak and drove as if he had been expecting exactly this for exactly this long. Armored, Adrian said into her hair. The glass is armored. Breathe. You're all right. That was, I know what it was. They were, I know, Lena. At a dinner? I know. He sat up. He helped her sit up. Her hair was ruined, and she did not care. The ring was still on her finger, and she did not care. The thing the woman in black had slipped into the small of her back was still there, and she reached behind her now, under the coat, and pulled it out. It was a small flat envelope, cream-colored, sealed. Her fingers knew, before her eyes did, that there was a flash drive inside it. What is that? I don't know. She held it up between them. The woman at the coat check, she put it in my dress. Adrian looked at the envelope. Adrian looked at her. Adrian, for the first time in the time she had known him, looked genuinely, completely surprised. That woman, he said, has worked that coat check for 19 years. She does not pass notes. She does not pass flash drives. She does not make contact with my guests. That is one of the rules of that room. Well, Lena said, and her voice came out not quite steady. Somebody changed the rules tonight. The town car turned east. The river came up on their left again, a different view this time. The bridge lit up over it like something built out of stars by a child who did not know when to stop. And Lena sat in the back of a car next to a man she had known for 2 days and held a flash drive she had been handed by a stranger at a dinner where somebody had just tried to kill her for the second time in 36 hours. And she understood with a clarity that felt almost restful that her old life was truly and completely gone. She put the envelope carefully in her lap. "Take me home," she said. Adrian looked at her. He understood, she thought, what she meant by the word. And she understood at the same second that she had meant the penthouse, and that realization was something she was going to have to deal with later when she had the time. "Vincent," Adrian said. "Already going, boss." They drove north along the river in silence, and Lena Voss, who had until 48 hours ago been a woman who served other people's champagne, sat in a ruined dress beside a man who had just put his own body between her and a bullet and held in both hands the first piece of the truth she had been running from for 12 years. She did not open it in the car. She knew somehow that whatever was on it was going to change what she was, and she wanted to be standing on her own 2 feet in a room with a door she could close when it did. She opened it in the study. She had taken off the coat at the door. She had taken off the shoes in the foyer. She had walked past Teresa, who had taken one look at her and asked no questions, and poured a glass of water and set it on a tray, and followed at a distance. And she had gone into the study and sat down in the chair she had sat in 2 nights before, and she had put the envelope flat on the low table between the 2 leather chairs, and she had not opened it yet. Adrian came in behind her. He closed the door. He went to the sideboard and did not pour a drink. He leaned on the sideboard with one hand, and the other hand went to the back of his neck and stayed there. And she understood that he was not angry, exactly, but he was as close to angry as she had seen him. And the thing he was angry at was not her and not the woman at the coat check, and not even Wyatt Halverson. It was the larger fact of somebody having moved a piece on a board he had believed he was controlling. "Teresa," he said, without looking up, "bring a laptop, the clean one, and don't come back in." Teresa brought the laptop, a slim black machine in a soft gray sleeve. She set it on the table. She looked at Lena for a second longer than she needed to, and then at Adrian, and then she left and closed the door behind her very softly. Lena slid the flash drive out of the envelope. It was small and plain, a dull silver, no logo, no label. She weighed it in her palm and looked at it for a long moment, the way a person might look at a key to a door they had been standing outside of for most of their life. "You don't have to open it now," Adrian said. "Yes, I do." "Lena." "Don't." She did not look up. "Don't be kind to me right now. I can't have you be kind to me right now. I will fall apart if you are, and I can't fall apart yet. Tell me how to open it." He came over. He sat down in the other chair. He opened the laptop. He pushed it toward her. She plugged the drive in herself. Her hand was steady. She had not known her hand would be steady. She had been learning new things about her own hands for 2 days now. A window opened on the screen. It asked for a password. She looked at Adrian. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I haven't seen this before. I don't know who's on the other end of this. Lena, if this is something the woman at the coat check was given to hand to you, it is for you. Try something that means something to you." She stared at the blinking cursor. She thought about her father. She thought about the yellow curtains in the kitchen on Crescent Drive. She thought about her brother Thomas, 11 years old, who had tried to reach a telephone. She thought about her cat, Margaret, who had been, according to a landlord in Scranton, an unusually unpleasant animal. She typed, "Margaret." The cursor blinked at her, and then the window shook very slightly, and a small red message appeared beneath the field. "Incorrect." She tried Thomas. "Incorrect." She sat with her hands flat on the keyboard, and she breathed, in through her nose and out through her mouth, and she tried to think the way her father had thought. Her father had been a small, quiet man with glasses and a slide rule he had kept on his desk from college. He had liked crossword puzzles. He had, her mother used to say, loved a joke too much to ever tell one well. She typed Crescent. Incorrect. She closed her eyes. Something was moving at the back of her head, a small, quick thing, the way a fish moves under ice. She had felt it on and off for 2 days, ever since Adrian had said the word pantry. Since before that, maybe. Since the moment she had seen her own face in a 9-year-old photograph with her hands covered in blood. She opened her eyes. She typed pantry door, all lowercase, no space. No underscore. Just the two words the way you would say them out loud. The window vanished. A directory opened. It was not large. There were 6 folders. They had been named with the kind of care of a man who had assumed he might not live to explain them. For Lena. Kato. Ledger. Names. Audio. If you are reading this. Lena sat very still. Adrian did not speak. She clicked on, if you are reading this. A single document opened. A plain white page. Her father's handwriting, scanned, the same slant she remembered from the notes he had taped to her lunchbox. The handwriting of a man who had never in his life learned to print, who wrote in a long, looping cursive that her teachers at the time had already considered old-fashioned. Lena, it said, if you are reading this, it means 2 things. It means, I am dead, which I am sorry for, because I had wanted very much to be there when you read it. And it means someone has done what I asked them to do. That person was brave. Please thank them if you ever know their name. I am going to be quick, because I do not know how much time you have, and I do not know who is in the room with you when you read this. Lena's eyes blurred. She blinked hard. The letters came back into focus. She felt Adrian next to her make himself very still, and she was grateful for it, because she could not have borne his hand on her right now, and she could not have borne it not being there either. The ledger in the folder called Ledger is Real. I took it. I took it because Paul Cotto was going to have your mother killed, Lena. He told me to my face. He told me he would do it if I did not cook his books the way he wanted. I cooked them for 2 years. I could not cook them anymore. I took the ledger the night of March 2nd, 2014, from the safe in the back of his restaurant on Smith Street, and I made 4 copies of it, and I hid them in 4 places. This drive is one of them. The second is with a man in Queens whose name is in the folder called Names. Do not go to him first. He is old, and he is frightened, and he will not survive a visit from anyone, including you. The third copy I gave to a federal agent. His name was Howard Sachs. I believed at the time that he was a good man. I am no longer certain of this. If you are reading this, and if Agent Sachs is still the one protecting you, you will need to be careful. If he is dead, you will need to be more careful. The 4th copy I hid in the house. Behind the loose brick in the fireplace, 2nd row up from the hearth. The one you could wiggle with your finger when you were 4 years old, and I told you not to. I do not know if the house is still standing. I do not know if anyone is living there. I do not know anything after the night I am writing this, because I am writing this on the night I am writing this, and I do not know if I will still be alive in the morning. Her breath caught. She had not known that he had been afraid. She had been 9 years old, and she had known that he had been tired, and that he had been quiet, and that he had been staying up at the kitchen table after she and Thomas had gone to bed. She had not known that he had been afraid. She had not let herself know for 12 years that he had been afraid. There is one more thing. I am writing this last because I am not sure how to write it, and if I write it first, I am afraid I will not write any of the rest. Lena, you are going to remember a thing. You may have remembered it already. You may remember it in 20 years. I do not know when it will come back to you. But it will come back because a thing like this always comes back. And when it does, I do not want you to be alone with it. You did nothing wrong. You hear me? You did nothing wrong. You were 9 years old, and there was a man in our house with a gun, and you did what any child in the world would do, and you are not to carry this on your back. Do you hear me, Lena? You are not to carry this. I love you more than anything I have ever been given in my life. I am sorry I am not going to see you grow up. I'm sorry I'm not going to see the woman you become. I'm sorry that you are going to have to become her without me. Your father. The document ended. Lena sat and looked at it. She did not cry. She thought she might, and then she did not. And then she thought she wanted to, and then she did not. The thing inside her chest that had cracked down the middle in the back of a Suburban 2 nights ago cracked the rest of the way. And whatever was inside it leaked out, slow and hot. And she sat very still and let it. Adrian had gone somewhere behind her. She realized this after a minute. He had stood up at some point during the letter and walked quietly to the window and turned his back to her, and she understood that he had done this on purpose, so that she could have the first reading of her father's last letter without a man watching her face. She reached up and pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes, hard, once, and then put her hands back in her lap. Adrian? Yes. You can turn around. He turned around. He did not come back to the chair. He leaned on the windowsill and watched her and did not say anything. His face, in the lamplight, looked older than it had looked at the Belmont Club. He said, she had to stop. She cleared her throat. He said I did a thing, as a child. He said it would come back to me. Yes. You know what the thing is. I have a guess. Tell me. No. She looked up. Adrian? No, Lena. Not like this. If you remember it on your own, it is a thing you lived through. If I tell you, it is a thing I put in your head. Those are not the same thing. I will not be the person who does that to you. I am telling you to tell me. And I am telling you that I am going to disappoint you on this one thing, and you may hate me for it, but I am not going to be the voice in your head that put your brother's death on a particular angle. You will get there on your own, or a doctor will get you there, and it will be you who arrived, not me. She held his eyes for a long second. She did not hate him for it. That was perhaps the worst part. She had expected to hate him. She had, in a small hard part of herself, been ready to, because hating him would have been simpler than the other things she was starting, dangerously, to feel. But she did not hate him. She saw, in the set of his mouth, a man making a choice that was going to cost him her trust, in exchange for her eventual ownership of her own memory, and she saw that he had already decided to pay the cost. All right, she said. All right. I want to see a doctor. I know one. Of course you do. She is a neuropsychologist who worked with the Bureau for 11 years. She retired early because she did not like what she was seeing the Bureau ask her to do. She is, in my opinion, the best in the city at the specific thing you need. I will have her here in the morning if you want. Yes. Yes. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. She closed the laptop. She did not close it all the way. She left it open an inch because closing it all the way felt like putting her father's letter away. And she was not ready to put her father's letter away. Not yet. Adrian. Yes. The ledger. Yes. There are 4 copies, he said. I heard. 1 in Queens, 1 with Howard Sachs, who is dead, 1 here in my hand, 1 in the house. Yes. Is the house still standing? He was quiet for a long time. Yes, he said. Is anyone living in it? No. You bought it? Yes. When? 6 years ago. A shell company. Nobody has been inside it for 5 years. I did not let anyone inside it. I did not go inside it myself. Why? Because when you came back to it, you needed it to be the way you left it. She closed her eyes. She did not know what to do with him. She did not know what to do with any of him. She had been, for 2 days, trying to fit Adrian Moretti into a shape she could handle. Enforcer, captor, handler, strategist, man of power. And every time she got the shape right, he said a thing like, because when you came back to it, you needed it to be the way you left it, and the shape broke, and she had to start again. I want to go there, she said. Tomorrow is the doctor. After the doctor. Lena, don't tell me it's not safe. Nothing is safe. The Belmont Club was not safe. A restaurant on Park was not safe. A ballroom at the Aurelian was not safe. The house is not going to be less safe than those. I want to go. All right, all right? All right, Lena. We go. After the doctor. If the doctor says you can, if she says you can't, we don't. That is not negotiable. That's fair. Thank you. For what? For not making me fight you on that one. She almost laughed. She did not, because laughing felt, right now, like it would turn into something else that she was not going to allow in front of him. Instead, she said, I need to sleep. I know. I don't think I can. I know. Adrian? Yes. Stay. She did not know she was going to say it until she said it. It surprised them both. She heard herself say it, and she felt her face get warm, and she did not look away from him, because looking away from him after saying something like that would have been the worst thing she could have done. He did not pretend to misunderstand her. He did not misunderstand her. He walked over to the other chair. He sat down in it. He leaned back. He put his hands flat on the arms of the chair, and he closed his eyes, and he said, I will be here when you wake up. You don't have to sit up all night. I'm not going to sit up all night. I'm going to sit up until you fall asleep. Then I'm going to go to bed in my own room. That's the deal. That's the deal, Lena. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she pulled her knees up under her in the other chair, and she arranged her coat over herself like a blanket, and she put her cheek against the leather, and she watched him, and he watched her, and the fire made its small settled sounds in the grate, and the river made no sound at all, 41 floors below them. And at some point, without being aware of it, she closed her eyes. She woke once in the night. The chair across from her was empty. There was a cashmere throw tucked around her that had not been there before. She understood, in the blur between asleep and awake, that he had kept his word, and she closed her eyes again and went back under. The doctor came at 10. She was a small, thin woman with gray hair cut close to her head and a pair of round tortoiseshell glasses that she did not take off, even to clean them. Her name was Dr. Renata Aslanian. She shook Lena's hand. She did not shake Adrian's. He left the room without being asked, and the doctor smiled faintly at the door after he had closed it and said, "I have known that young man for a very long time. Is he behaving himself?" "Yes." She sat down in the chair Adrian had slept in, and she opened a small brown leather notebook, and for the next 3 hours, she asked Lena questions that did not feel like questions. They felt like conversation. She asked about Scranton. She asked about Mrs. Ferguson. She asked about the cat Margaret, which made Lena, for the first time in the session, laugh. She asked about the yellow curtains in the kitchen and whether they had had a pattern on them and what the pattern was. She asked about Thomas's bedroom. She asked about the closet in Thomas's bedroom. She asked very gently about the pantry. And somewhere around the second hour, she put down the pen and looked at Lena and said, "Would you close your eyes, dear?" Lena closed her eyes. "You are 9 years old. You are in the pantry. Your mother has just closed the door. What can you hear?" Voices. Whose? My father. A man I don't know. 2 men I don't know. What are they saying? I can't hear the words. I can hear my father saying, "Please." He keeps saying, "Please." All right. What else? My mother she is trying to get between them. She keeps saying, "Daniel, Daniel." She's trying to get to him. And then, a gun. A shot. My mother falls. Lena stopped. She falls and I hear her head hit the floor. That is the worst sound. I had forgotten the worst sound. That is the sound. That is the sound. Breathe, dear, slowly. Stay with me. You are 9 years old and you are in the pantry. What do you do? I come out. Tell me how you come out. I open the door. The handle is above my head. I have to stretch. My fingers I am shaking. I get the door open. I come out. What do you see? My mother, on the floor. My father on his knees. Thomas is by the phone. He is trying to dial. A man is moving toward him. What does the man look like? Young. He looks young. Younger than my father. He has a tattoo on his neck. A bird. A black bird. He is raising his gun. What do you do? Lena's eyes were closed. Her breathing was very fast. Her hands were in fists in her lap, and she did not remember putting them there. Dr. Aslanian did not reach out to her. Dr. Aslanian sat very still and kept her voice very level and said again, "What do you do, Lena?" I pick up. There is a. Take your time. There is a knife on the counter near the stove. My mother had been making dinner. She had cut vegetables. The knife is still on the counter. Yes. I pick up the knife. And then her hand came up to her own mouth. She did not want to say the next thing. 12 years of not saying the next thing had built, in the back of her head, a kind of building. And all of that building had been built around not saying the next thing. And to say the next thing was to pull out the one beam the whole building rested on. "Lena," said Dr. Aslanian very gently, "you were 9 years old. Whatever you did, you were 9 years old." Yes. I walked behind him. He did not see me. He was looking at Thomas. I walked behind him. I put the knife in his back. I put it in with 2 hands. I had to, I had to use both hands. Her voice broke. He fell. He fell and the gun went off when he fell, but it went into the wall. He fell on top of the knife. I pulled it out. I remember that I pulled it out because I did not want to leave it in him. I was 9 years old. I did not.
I know, dear. The other men came in. They had been in the hallway. They came in and they saw him and they picked him up. They picked him up and they carried him out. They did not shoot me. I was standing in the kitchen with the knife in my hand and they did not shoot me. Why didn't they shoot me? What do you think? I don't. What do you think, Lena? Because they knew him. He was one of them. I had killed one of them. They were not ready. They ran. They took him and they ran. They did not finish. That is why my father, her voice collapsed. My father was still alive when they left. He was on the floor. He was bleeding, but he was alive. I went to him. I was holding the knife. I put the knife down. I went to him. He put his hand on my face. He said, "You did right, baby. You did right." That is what he said. Those were the last words my father ever said to me. He said, "You did right." She was not crying. She should have been crying. She had expected to be crying. Instead, she was sitting very still in the leather chair with her eyes closed and her hands in her lap. And her voice had stopped shaking, and she had the specific and terrible clarity of a woman who had just pulled a splinter out of herself that had been there for 12 years. "I killed him," she said. "I killed a man when I was 9. "You stopped a man," said Dr. Aslanian, "from killing your brother. You did not succeed because your brother was already dying. But you stopped him. Your father was correct. You did right." Open your eyes, Lena. Lena opened her eyes. Dr. Aslanian's face was kind. Not professional kind. Not the kind that people put on at work. Really kind. The kind that comes off a person who has been sitting across from frightened people for 30 years and has not lost the ability to feel sorry for them. "You are going to have a very bad day," Dr. Aslanian said. "Possibly 2. Possibly a week. That is all right. That is how this works. You have carried this for 12 years and your body did not know it was carrying it, and now it does. And it is going to be angry with you for a little while. Let it be angry. Do not drink. Do not drive. Do not make large decisions. Call me if you need to, any hour, and I do not say that to be polite. Thank you. You are very strong, Lena Voss. I don't feel strong." "No, you wouldn't. Strong people never do." She left. Lena sat in the chair for a long time after she was gone. The light in the study had shifted. It was past 1. Somewhere in the apartment, a door opened and closed. Somewhere farther away, a phone rang and was answered in 2 rings. Teresa was doing something in the kitchen. Lena could smell, faintly, garlic and thyme, and the warm particular smell of olive oil hitting a hot pan. She got up. She went to the window. The river, in the early afternoon, was green, not black. There was a tug pushing a barge of scrap metal south. There were, on the Queen's side, 3 cranes at rest, their long arms slack over a construction site that had been slack for longer than the cranes. The man she had killed at 9 years old had had a black bird tattooed on his neck. She now understood, spent 12 years not looking at birds. Adrian found her there. He did not say anything. He stood beside her at the window, close enough that she could smell the soap he had used that morning, and he did not touch her, and she was grateful. "She told you. She told me enough. She did not tell me what you said. That is between you and her, unless you tell me." "I will tell you." "You don't have to." "I will tell you later." "All right. Adrian?" "Yes." "The man, the one I—" "Yes." "Did he have a name?" "Yes." "What was it?" "Nico Cotto." She closed her eyes. "Paul Cotto's son?" "Yes." "His only son?" "Yes." That is why. Yes, Lena. That is why. That is why 12 years. That is why tonight. That is why he would spend what he has spent. He is not trying to get a ledger back. The ledger is a reason. The ledger is a story he tells himself and his people about why this has to happen. What he is trying to do is kill the child who killed his child. It has taken him 12 years to be ready to do it, because for most of those 12 years, my father would not let him. My father is dead now. There is nobody left who will not let him, except me. She breathed, in through her nose, out through her mouth. Adrian. Yes. Take me to the house. Now. Now. Lena, the doctor said, I heard what the doctor said. I am not going to drink. I am not going to drive. I am going to go to the house my father hid the last copy of the ledger in, because I now know what that ledger is, and I now know why it is worth what it is worth, and I am not going to sit in this room for 1 more hour waiting for another man with a gun to come find me. I am going to go get the thing myself. Are you coming with me or not? He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time, and then something moved in his face, something that had not been there 2 days ago and maybe had not been there in a long time, and he said very quietly, Yes, I'm coming with you. Good. Lena. What? I have wanted for a very long time to meet the woman you were going to become. She did not have an answer for that. She could not have had an answer for that. She turned away from the window so that he would not see what her face was doing, and she said, Get the car. And she walked out of the study, and he did not follow her, and she did not hear him follow her for a full 30 seconds, during which she stood in the hallway with one hand flat against the wall and let the wall hold her up. Then she heard his footsteps, and she let go of the wall, and she walked to the elevator, and he caught up to her there, and neither of them said anything on the way down. Vincent was waiting. The Suburban was running. It was a bright, cold afternoon in New York, and the wind off the river had teeth in it, and Lena Voss climbed into the back of a black SUV beside a man who was no longer, she understood, quite a stranger, and the car pulled out into traffic and turned east across the bridge, and they drove toward the house she had last walked out of on the night she was 9. The house was on a street she would not have recognized if someone had dropped her there blindfolded. It was not that the street had changed, it was that her memory of it had been 9 years old, and a 9-year-old street was a different street than the one a 31-year-old woman walked down in a borrowed coat on a cold afternoon in April. The trees were smaller than she remembered. The houses were closer together. A fire hydrant she had once thought of as her landmark, the one halfway between her bus stop and her front walk, was red now. It had been yellow when she was 9. She did not know when they had painted it. She did not know who they were. She stood on the sidewalk and looked at the fire hydrant for longer than was strictly necessary, because looking at the fire hydrant was easier than looking at the house. Adrian waited. He did not rush her. He had told Vincent to park around the corner. He had told the second car, the one with the 2 men whose names Lena did not know, to park at the far end of the block. He had walked her the last 200 feet himself, slowly, his hands in his pockets, like a man taking a stroll, and nobody who saw them from a window would have seen a woman on the edge of her own mind and a man calibrating, second by second, how close she was to it. The hydrant used to be yellow, she said. Okay. I don't know when they painted it red. Okay. I'm stalling. Yes. I know I'm stalling. I know you know. She laughed. One small, cracked sound. She pressed her hand briefly over her mouth, and then she took the hand down and she turned and she looked at the house. It was smaller than the house in her memory. It was always going to be smaller than the house in her memory. It was a narrow 2-story on a narrow lot, brick-painted cream, green shutters that needed a coat. A short concrete walk. 3 steps up to a front door that had been blue once and was now a color that was not quite any color, the way paint gets when nobody has touched it in a long time. The grass in the front yard had been recently cut. She looked at Adrian. He looked back at her and shrugged, very slightly, and she understood that a man had been paid for 6 years to cut the grass on a house nobody lived in, because one day a woman was going to walk up to it, and that woman was going to need the grass to be cut. The key, he said, and handed her a key. It was a modern key. It had not been the key her mother used. Her mother's keys had been brass, round-headed, on a red leather fob with a little plastic bee on it that Thomas had been given by a dentist and had tied to the ring with a piece of string when he was 6. The The key Adrian handed her was a plain silver house key on no ring at all. Did you change the locks? Yes. Why?
Because the original locks had been picked once 2 years after you left. Somebody went through the house. I don't know who. I don't know what they were looking for. They did not find whatever it was. I know because the ledger is still behind the brick. You checked?
No, I promised I would not. I kept the promise. But my grandfather built that fireplace, Lena. He built it for your grandfather's sister in 1959, as a favor. That loose brick is the reason I believed your father's letter could be real before I ever read it. My father knew about the brick. I grew up knowing about the brick. It was a family joke for a small number of families. If your father put something behind that brick and nobody in my family took it out, nobody took it out, because nobody else in this city ever knew the brick was loose. She stared at him. You didn't tell me that part. No. That feels like a thing you could have told me. It is a thing I could have told you. I chose not to. Some of what you are about to do, you need to do without me in the middle of it. Your father left a thing for you. I am going to stand on the porch. I am not going inside. You are going inside by yourself. If you need me, you call my name and I will come. If you do not need me, you don't. And I will not cross that threshold uninvited. Do you understand? Adrian? Yes. Thank you. Take the key, Lena. She took the key. She walked up the 3 steps. The third one gave a little, the way she remembered it, giving a little when she was 9 and had tried to sneak down at night to steal a cookie from the dog-shaped cookie jar. She put the key in the lock. Her hand, she noticed with an almost clinical detachment, was perfectly steady. She turned the key. The bolt clicked back. She pushed the door. The house smelled of dust and of old paint and of the specific emptiness of a house that had not been lived in for a long time, and under that, somehow, impossibly, faintly, of her mother's soap. It was not her mother's soap. It could not be her mother's soap. It was some version of what her body remembered when it smelled the dust and the old paint in a certain arrangement, and it unfolded inside her ribcage like a drawer opening. She stood in the doorway, and she breathed. The foyer was empty. The furniture had been taken. She did not know by whom, did not know when. The hardwood floors were bare. There was a rectangle on the wall where a mirror had hung, a paler rectangle of wallpaper protected for 15 years from the fading sun. She remembered the mirror. She remembered looking at herself in it at 8 years old in the snow boots she had gotten for her birthday, making a face to see what she looked like, angry. She stepped inside. The kitchen was to her right. She did not look at the kitchen. Not yet. She was not ready for the kitchen. She walked instead down the hall to the living room, and there, across the far wall, was the fireplace. And there, in the front of the fireplace, was the hearth. And on the hearth was a small piece of red string tied around nothing that had been there, she knew with absolute certainty, since she was 6 years old and had been playing Fortress with Thomas, and had tied a ribbon around an imaginary cannon. She knelt down in front of the fireplace. The brick was second row up from the hearth, slightly left of center. She had wiggled it as a child with her finger, and her father had told her not to, and she had wiggled it anyway because she had been 4 and because he had made it sound like a game. She put her finger against it now and she wiggled it. It moved. She worked it out slowly. It came free after maybe a minute of patient back and forth. It was heavier than she had remembered. Everything in this house was either larger or smaller than she had remembered, and nothing was the size she had kept it. Behind the brick was a hole in the mortar the size of a fist. Inside the hole was a plastic bag. Inside the plastic bag was a small spiral notebook and a flash drive. She sat back on her heels. She held the bag in her lap, and she was, for a second, 9 years old again, kneeling on the same hearth, watching her father in her peripheral vision pretend not to see her messing with the brick. She put the brick back without looking at it. She did not look inside the bag yet. She stood up. She walked slowly out of the living room, across the hall, and into the kitchen. The kitchen had been cleaned, really cleaned. Somebody had scrubbed it to the bone at some point in the last 15 years. And then time had put its own kind of dust on top of the cleaning, and the result was a room that had been emptied of everything that had ever mattered in it. The yellow curtains were gone. The dog-shaped cookie jar was gone. The counter where the knife had been was the same counter. She stood in the middle of the floor where her mother had fallen. She did not cry. She had thought she might, and she did not. The crying had happened, it turned out, last night, silently, in the hour after Dr. Aslanian had left, in a chair next to a window, and she had not known at the time that that had been the crying. The thing that happened in the kitchen was different. She stood in the place where her mother had died, and she said out loud to nobody, "I'm sorry, Mom." And she said out loud to nobody, "Thomas, I'm sorry." And she said out loud to nobody, "I came back." Then she turned and walked out of the kitchen. Adrian was on the porch. He had not moved. His back was to the house. He was watching the street, one hand in his pocket, the other, she realized with a small cold jolt, resting on the butt of something inside his jacket that she had not wanted to think about for 48 hours. "Adrian," he turned. "Okay?" "Okay." She showed him the bag. He looked at it and he did not touch it, and he said, "We'll open it in the car." "Yes." "Lena." "Yes." "You did good." "Don't." "Okay." They were halfway down the walk when the first car turned onto the street. It was black and it came fast, and it was followed 10 seconds later by a second car and a third. And the third was unmarked but had the specific rounded grille of an American sedan that was only ever driven by one kind of employer. Adrian stopped. He stopped so fast that Lena, half a step behind him, walked into his shoulder. He did not move his hand out of his pocket. He turned his head very slightly to his left and then very slightly to his right, reading the block. And she could feel him counting. Windows, roof lines, the angle of the sun, the gap between the parked cars. The way she had once, at the Aurelian, counted tables and service doors without knowing she was doing it. "Vincent," he said, not loudly. He was not talking to her. He had, she realized, an earpiece in. She had not noticed. He had been wearing it all day. "Vincent, do you see them?" A pause. Vincent's voice came through whatever Adrian was wearing, too low for Lena to make out the words. "Yes," Adrian said. "Both. Hold position. Do not move until I say." The first car stopped at the mouth of the driveway. 2 men got out. Not young, mid-40s. Heavy coats. One was bald. The other had a beard trimmed down to the kind of shadow that looked expensive. Neither had his hands visible. The bald one smiled at Lena as if she had arrived at his daughter's birthday party. "Miss Voss," he said. "Paul sends his regards." Lena did not answer. She was not sure she could have. Her throat had closed up, but not with fear exactly, with a specific cold registration of the shape of the situation. Paul Cotto had sent 2 men. That was the first car. The second car and the third car were something else. She risked a glance down the block. The second car, dark green, 4 doors, a driver and a passenger she could not make out, had stopped 20 feet behind the first. The third car, the American sedan, had stopped at the far end of the block and had not disgorged anybody yet, and that, she understood without understanding why, was the one to be afraid of. "I don't know you," she said to the bald man. "No, ma'am, you wouldn't. Paul would very much like to speak with you. My colleague and I have been asked to invite you to come have that conversation." "I'm not available." "With respect, ma'am, that isn't one of the options." "Stop walking," Adrian said mildly, without taking his eyes off the bald man. The bald man stopped walking. He had not, in fact, been walking very fast. He had been drifting, the way a person drifts when he is trying to close distance without calling attention to the closing. He stopped with his weight on his back foot and his hands open at his sides in a show of not being armed that Lena did not believe for a second. "Adrian." "Walter." "Didn't expect you here today." "No, you wouldn't have." "Paul's going to be disappointed. Paul is going to be a great many things before the day is over. Disappointed is the least of them." The bearded man, Lena noticed, had begun to drift, not toward her, but laterally, toward the green hedge that separated the house from the one next door. He was establishing an angle. She had in the last 48 hours become a woman who noticed when men were establishing angles. "Adrian," she said quietly. "I see him." At the far end of the block, the doors of the American sedan opened. 2 men got out of the front. A third man got out of the back, slowly, the way a man gets out of a car when he wants to be seen getting out of a car. He was tall, blonde, going gray, a good suit under a darker coat. He had a federal pin on his lapel, just visible, Wyatt Halverson. He began, without hurrying, to walk toward them. "Oh," Lena said. "Yes,
Adrian said. He's really, yes, at the same time as, yes? That's not a,
It's not a coincidence. No, they coordinated. Badly, as far as I can tell. He wasn't supposed to be here this early. They stepped on each other's play. What do we say? Stand very still for 6 seconds. I am about to do something. Do not react. Do you understand? Yes.
He did not move his hand. He did not move his mouth. But something, somewhere, registered because Vincent's voice came through the earpiece again, clipped, and 2 seconds later from around the corner where the Suburban had been parked, there came a sound Lena had not expected. The low, wet whump of a smoke grenade hitting the pavement, and then another, and then a third, and then the sharp crack of a flashbang at the far end of the block, not close enough to blind them, close enough to make Wyatt Halverson and his 2 men flinch and go down into a defensive crouch with their hands over their faces.
Now, Adrian said. Now what?
We go through the house.
The back door. Through the yard.
There is a gap in the fence on the left side. Vincent is 2 blocks over. Move. They moved. Walter, the bald man, had started to raise whatever was in his coat, and Adrian, in a single motion Lena did not entirely follow, a thing that was not quite a punch and not quite a push, put him on the concrete on his back with his breath gone out of him, and the bearded man, drifting toward the hedge, had made it halfway to his gun when the second of Adrian's men, who had been waiting on the roofline of the house across the street for the entire time, shot him cleanly through the right shoulder from about 90 feet, and the bearded man went down screaming, and Lena did not see any of that because she was already inside the house. Back door, Adrian said, close behind her. Kitchen. Yes, she was running in low heels through a house that had been her house, and the house was dark, because the smoke from the street had gotten into it through the open front door, and her 9-year-old self was in the hallway and on the stairs and in the kitchen, standing in every doorway like a row of ghosts. And she ran past all of them, and through the kitchen, and across the place her mother had died, and to the back door, and the back door was locked. Adrian, move. He kicked it. The frame gave on the second kick. The door swung open onto the backyard she did not remember at all. A small patch of brown grass and a plum tree that was either new or had grown from nothing into an adult tree in the years she had been away, and there was a wooden fence, and there was a gap in the fence at the left side, just as he had said, and they went through the gap, and they were in the neighbor's yard, and they were running. Behind them, the flashbang kept echoing, and somebody was shouting, and a car engine started up. Vincent was 2 blocks over, idling at a curb, the back door already open. Lena half fell into the seat. Adrian slid in after her. The Suburban was moving before the door had closed. The second time in 4 days it had done that, and she thought, with an odd flat clarity, I should get used to this. And then she thought, no, I should not. I should make sure I never have to get used to this. And then she realized she had not been breathing, and she made herself breathe. Everybody clear? Vincent said, not turning. We're clear. Call Michael. Tell him to move the second team. They're going to regroup on Halverson, and I want the second team in the way when they do. Copy. And Vincent. Yeah. Good work back there. Nah. They drove. Lena sat with the plastic bag in her lap. She had not let go of it once. She had run through her childhood kitchen with it clutched to her chest, and she had not let go. And now, in the back seat of the Suburban, with her heart hammering and her breath still catching, she looked down at it, and she looked at Adrian, and Adrian looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a long minute. Open it, he said at last. Here? We have 11 minutes until the next car catches up with us, maybe. Maybe 15. I want to know what we have before we get to where we're going. She opened the bag. Inside was a spiral notebook, the cheap kind with the blue cover. The cover had her father's handwriting on it. For Lena. When she is ready. She did not open it yet. Underneath was the flash drive. He made 2, she said. Here, this drive and the one at the coat check. Yes. Why 2? Because he did not believe either one of them alone would survive. One was for when you were being protected. One was for when you weren't. My guess is the woman at the Belmont Club was holding it for him since the week before he died. He put it where he knew I would take you, eventually, one night. He put it in the hands of a woman he trusted, who would wait 15 years to hand it to a girl she had never met. Who was she? My mother. Lena looked up. You're my mother. She works the coat check at the Belmont Club 2 nights a week. She has done this since I was a child. It is her favorite room in the city. She does not know, most of the time, what any of us do. She does not ask. When my father died, she asked me one question, which was whether he had been a good man. I did not lie to her. She did not cry. She went back to the coat check. What she did not tell me, Lena, is that my father had asked her years ago to hold a small envelope and to give it to the next woman he brought to that club who looked afraid. That is the only instruction she had. That is the only thing she knew. She saw your face when we went up the stairs and she decided you were the woman in the instruction. Lena sat with that for a while. Your mother is the woman at the coat check. Yes. Your mother worked for your father. My mother worked the coat check, Lena, because she liked to. Because it was the most civilized room in the city. She happened to be married to a man who, for 50 years, kept the coat check in his back pocket as a place to leave things he did not want found in a safe. He had no business doing that. She did not know he was doing it. She put on her reading glasses every Wednesday and every Saturday, and she hung coats and gave people their coats back. And that is all she ever did. This one time, she did more than that. Because of an instruction he gave her when I was 18, that she had kept. Without asking. Lena did not know what it was. I know. Your mother. Yes, Lena. Is she safe? She is on a plane, he said. She has been on a plane since 4 o'clock. She is, as of about an hour ago, in a country I am not going to tell you the name of, in a house she has never been to before. And she will stay there for as long as this takes. She will complain the whole time. She will tell anyone within earshot that her son does not know how to run a bath. She will live. Adrian. Yes. Thank you. Open the notebook. She opened the notebook. Her father had not been a writer. He had been an accountant. The notebook was laid out the way an accountant would lay it out, in columns, in his long looping cursive, with dates and names and numbers. Not a ledger of payments, a ledger of people. Who had been paid, who had done the paying, who had received. What they had received, what they had done in return, names she did not know, names she did. On page 11, halfway down the left column, was the name Wyatt Halverson, and next to it was a date that was 16 years old, and next to that date was a number, and next to the number was a word, a single word in her father's hand, prosecutor. On page 14, Howard Sachs, agent. On page 17, Paul Cotto, principal. On page 21, a man whose name she did not recognize, with the word judge beside it. On page 32, Antonio Moretti, principal. She stopped. She looked up. Adrian was not looking at the notebook. He was looking out the window at the Queensboro Bridge coming up in the distance. Your father? Yes. In the ledger? Yes, Lena. You knew? Yes. You gave me this ledger, knowing your father was in it. I did not give it to you. You found it. In a house I preserved for you because I promised myself 6 years ago that I would. The ledger is what it is. My father was what he was. Neither of those things is a thing I can argue with you about, and I am not going to try. Adrian, it is what it is. This could destroy your family, your name, your whole. Yes. And you. Yes, Lena. You just. Yes. She closed the notebook. She held it in her hands. It weighed almost nothing. It was a stack of paper held together by a wire coil, bought for $2 at a drugstore in 2014 by a small, quiet accountant with a slide rule on his desk and a daughter he had hidden in a pantry. And it was going to, if she let it, burn down half of New York. Adrian. Yes. Where are we going? We have a safe house in Westchester, 40 minutes. It is clean. It has been clean since 1998. Nobody outside of 4 people knows about it. We go there tonight. Tomorrow we make copies. We make many copies. We distribute the copies to people who will know what to do with them. Journalists. Prosecutors who are not in this book. 2 senators who are not in this book. A judge in Rhode Island who owes me nothing and hates every person on page 11 more than he has ever hated anything. We make this public. We make it public in a way that cannot be unmade. That is how this ends for Paul Cotto. That is how this ends for Wyatt Halverson. That is how this ends for the men on page 14 and page 17 and page 32. Not with a car chase, Lena. With paper.
And you? Me what? Your father is on page 32. Yes. What happens to you? That, he said, is a thing I have been ready to find out for 3 years. It is not your problem. It is not your decision. I made my decision about it at a desk at dawn 6 years ago. I have been walking toward this particular dawn every day since. Do not ask me to unmake that walk now. I'm not asking you to unmake it. Then what are you asking? I'm asking if... She stopped.
She did not know how to finish the sentence. She did not know what she was asking. She knew only that she was sitting in the back of a Suburban beside a man who had just walked her into a house he had preserved for 6 years on the chance that one day she would need to walk into it, and who was about to hand her a document that would cost him everything he had, and she did not know what to do with that, and she did not know what to want from it. Adrian. Yes. Later. Later. Let me think. Think as long as you need. She did not open the notebook again. She closed the plastic bag around it. She put the flash drive in her coat pocket. She sat with her forehead against the cold window and she watched the bridge go by, and then Queens, and then the Bronx, and then the long, slow unspooling of the Hutchinson River Parkway. And she thought. 6 weeks later, she was in a city she had never been to before. The city was not New York. It was not Scranton. It was not a city you had heard of unless you were from a certain part of the country, and even then you would have thought of it only briefly, in passing, the way you think of any small place that is not where you grew up. It had a river. It had a coffee shop on a corner run by a woman with tattoos up one arm who did not ask questions and did not care what name you gave her. It had an apartment on the 4th floor of a brick building over a dry cleaner, and the apartment had one window that faced east and got the morning sun. And Lena Voss had been sitting in that window for most of the morning with a cup of coffee going cold in her hand. On the table in front of her was a laptop. On the laptop was the ledger. On the laptop was also 12 open news articles. Some of them she had read already. Some of them she had been saving for this morning, because this morning she had decided was the morning she was going to read all of them in order and close the laptop and not open it again for the rest of the day. Paul Cotto was in federal custody. He had been taken at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday, 3 weeks ago, at a house in New Jersey that he had believed nobody knew about. He was going to be in federal custody for the rest of his life. The prosecutors on his case were, Lena had read in the 3rd article, new to their jobs and not in the ledger. Wyatt Halverson was dead. He had shot himself in his office on the 9th floor of a federal building in Lower Manhattan on a Thursday afternoon at 3:05, after being told by his chief that his resignation would not, in fact, be enough. She was not sorry. She had tried, for 2 nights after the news had come in, to be sorry, and she had not been able to manage it, and she had decided, eventually, that not being sorry was all right, that a person was allowed to not be sorry about certain specific things. Howard Sachs was already dead, had been dead for months, and she was working on what to do with the memory of him, which was complicated because he had saved her life and had also, for 8 of the 12 years after, sold pieces of it. She did not know yet what she thought of him. She had decided on the advice of Dr. Aslanian that she did not have to know yet. Some people you made up your mind about on the day you met them. Some people took longer. Some people you were still making up your mind about 20 years after they were in the ground. That was allowed. Antonio Moretti had been dead for 19 months. Antonio Moretti was not going to be charged with anything because Antonio Moretti was not going to be tried. You did not try the dead. But Antonio Moretti was in the ledger, and the ledger was in the newspapers, and the Moretti name, which had once meant a particular kind of power in a particular kind of room, meant now the particular kind of shame that attaches itself to an old name the week after the world reads the ledger. Adrian had known it would. He had known it for 6 years. He had walked into it anyway. He had, 2 weeks ago, sat down across a wooden table from 2 federal prosecutors and a stenographer in a small, quiet room in a building in Connecticut, and he had, over the course of 3 days, told them things. He had told them things about his father. He had told them things about himself. He had told them things that had cost him, in the 2 weeks since, almost everything he had been born with. And he had done it, he had told her on the night after the first day. Because the price of the ledger being real is that all of it has to be real, Lena, even the part that is us. He was not in prison. He would not be in prison. He had traded, carefully, over many months, A very specific set of testimonies for a very specific kind of immunity, and he had been, Dr. Aslanian had said once dryly, a very good negotiator, which he had. He had made a deal that would end one kind of Adrian Moretti and keep him alive to become another one. He was not, however, in New York anymore. Neither was Lena. The city she was sitting in, on the fourth floor of a brick building over a dry cleaner, was a place the two of them had chosen together, without much conversation, a week after the ledger had hit the papers. They had driven north and then west, and then a little south, and they had stopped in this city because Lena had liked the river, and because Adrian had liked the coffee shop, and because neither of them had been asked for identification at the motel they had stayed in on the first night. They were not, she should be clear, married. They were not, she should be clear, a couple. At least not in any language Lena had a word for yet. They were something else, something she was still working on, something she suspected she was going to be working on for the rest of her life. He had his own apartment, 6 blocks over. He had his own door. He had, she suspected, his own private things he was working out, because he had grown up a certain kind of son of a certain kind of man, and that was not a thing you walked away from in 6 weeks. But he came to her window most mornings. He came with 2 coffees from the corner shop, and he knocked twice. And she let him in, and they sat in 2 chairs she had bought at a thrift store for $19. And they read the paper together, and most days they did not say anything about the paper, because the paper was about a story that had, against all odds, stopped being their story. This morning he was not there yet. She had been waiting for him, without admitting she was waiting for him, for about an hour. She had read 3 of the 12 articles. She had drunk half the coffee. She had watched a man walk a very small dog past the dry cleaner at 9:15, and she had watched the same man walk the same dog back past the dry cleaner at 9:22, and this had made her, for reasons she could not identify, absurdly happy. A knock at the door. 2 knocks. The pattern. She got up. She opened it. He was holding 2 coffees. "You're late," she said. "Line was long." "You always say the line was long." "The line is always long." He came in. He set the coffees on the table. He looked at the laptop. He looked at the open articles. He looked at her. "You're reading them all." "All of them, this morning, and then I'm closing it." "Good." "Adrian." "Yes." "Sit down." He sat down. She sat across from him in her thrift store chair, and she pulled her knees up under her, and she wrapped her hands around the warm cup, and she watched him over the top of it, and she thought about what she wanted to say, and she thought about how to say it, and she decided, finally, to say it the way he had said things to her for the last 6 weeks, which was to say, plainly, without making a speech out of it, "I am not going to hide anymore. I know. I am going to use my name. I know. I have been thinking, I am going to go back and finish the degree I never got. I don't know what in. I don't know if I want to be anything in particular. I just want to sit in a classroom and not look over my shoulder for 4 years. I think I want that for 4 years." "That sounds right." "And she stopped. "And I don't know what you are to me yet. I know. I am not going to pretend to know. I am not going to lie to you, and I am not going to lie to myself. And I am not going to wake up one morning in 2 years and realize I have been calling a man my husband who was actually, the whole time, the man who got me out of a ballroom in a dress that did not belong to me. I am not going to do that. I like you. I do not know what liking you is yet. I am going to find out slowly. That is the only way I know how to find anything out now. I used to find things out fast. I am done with that." "Okay? You are allowed to want more than that, Adrian, and if you do, you have to tell me, and we will have to have a conversation about it." "I'm not going to want more than what you're going to give me, Lena. Don't promise that. I'm not promising. I'm telling you what is true today. What is true in 3 years, I don't know. If that changes, I will tell you, but today what I want is to bring you coffee, and to sit in this apartment, and to read the paper with you, for however long you will let me, that is all. That is a lot. It is what I have." She looked at him. He looked back. The morning sun had moved across the kitchen floor, and it had caught on the laptop, and it had caught on the side of his face, and she saw the scar over his eyebrow do its small trick of vanishing and returning, and she thought, for the first time without fear, "I know this face. I know this man. I do not know what I am going to do with him, but I know him. Close the laptop, Lena. I was going to. Close it. She closed it. The articles went away. The ledger went away. The names, all of them, the living and the dead, the guilty and the also guilty, the men who had been her father's killers, and the men who had been her father's friends, went away. What she had learned over 6 weeks was this: you did not become free of a thing by destroying it. You did not become free of a thing by understanding it either. You became free of a thing by deciding, one small morning at a time, in a thrift store chair, beside a man who brought you coffee, that the thing was no longer the loudest voice in your head. Her father had written her a letter. She had, folded in a drawer in her bedroom, a copy of it on paper now, printed out and refolded so many times it was starting to soften at the creases. She did not look at it every day. Some days she did. Some days she didn't. She had stopped, at some point in the last month, reading it in his voice, and had started reading it in her own, which was, Dr. Aslanian had said on the phone the week before, a very good sign. He had written, "You did right, baby, you did right." He had been wrong about some of it. He had been wrong about a lot of it. He had been a small, quiet accountant who had tried, at the end of his life, to do one large, loud thing, and he had not lived to see how it came out. But he had been right about the only thing he had really needed to be right about, which was her. She had been a 9-year-old girl in a pantry. She had come out. She had come out, and she had gone 12 years without understanding why she was still breathing, and she had come out the second time, into a ballroom, and into a penthouse, and into an apartment over a dry cleaner, and she was still breathing, and she was, for the first morning in her life she could remember, not running from anything. Adrian was drinking his coffee. He was not watching her. He had, over 6 weeks, learned not to watch her in certain moments, which was, she thought, one of the better things a person could learn about another person. She reached across the thrift store table. She put her hand, very lightly, on top of his. He did not look up. His hand turned under hers, slowly, and his fingers laced loosely into hers, and neither of them said anything, and the man walked his very small dog past the dry cleaner for the 3rd time that morning, and the sun moved another inch across the kitchen floor, and Lena Voss, who had spent 12 years being invisible and 6 weeks being something else, sat in her own kitchen, in her own chair, in her own city, in her own life, and she drank her coffee, and she was, for the first time she could remember, simply there,